Welcome to the Preservation Evoker Guide for Midnight. My name is Bowser the Healer, and down below is a table of contents if you know what you're looking for. If you're new or you're returning to Preservation Evoker and want to know all about what's changed, the Beginner's Guide section will be the start of the guide, and it'll make sense as you follow along in chronological order. You can grab the build that I provided for you down below labeled Beginner and watch and try out all the things that I show you on screen. While this guide is Mythic Plus oriented, it's important to note that a lot of what you do in Raid and in PvP is taught through the lens of Mythic Plus, so if you're trying to learn this spec for Raid, I think this is still a good place to get started, and I will go through various important talents and even potential builds you might be running in Raid. And this guide is meant to live a very long life. I don't expect that the basics of Preservation Evoker are going to change too much from here, or at least for this expansion. So if there are any major updates, I'll make new videos going over them, but if you're listening to this video at a later season, it's probably still a decent spot for starting with Preservation Evoker. And if for whatever reason enough changes I feel I need to make a new video, I will replace this video with a new one, so don't worry about it. That being said, if you like this kind of content, this is my full-time job now, and it would mean the world to me if you could give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Now, let's talk all about Preservation Evoker. What is Preservation Evoker? Preservation Evoker is a healer that can do everything, from strong AoE healing, heal over times, spot healing, and a limited but strong amount of single target healing, excellent external defensives, and even pretty good damage. It sounds too good to be true, right? Well, here's the catch. It's that you have a limited amount of resources. Outside of your basic heal Living Flame, everything is a cooldown, or it uses your unique resource called Essence. Preservation's unique ability to copy spells onto other targets and essentially combo actions and sequences means that as long as you, the player, remain flexible, you will always have resources to play with. The other struggle of Preservation is a limited 25 to 30 yard range, with only 2 of your moves going roughly 40 yards and beyond. But alongside that disadvantage, we are given some of the best movement in the game and can cast a majority of our spells while moving. Now, this is a good place for me to mention this. Preservation is not an easy healer. If this is your first healer in World of Warcraft, buckle up. There's a lot going on here. But once you start pressing some buttons and understanding its flow, Preservation is unlike anything else in the MMO space as a healer. There are other healers that are easier. This is the hardest healer, but the reward is that you can do it all, and you can look sick while doing it too. Let's start the Beginner's Guide section. Once again, grab the talent build down below labeled Beginner, which is a solid way to start playing, and let's begin. Before we go over any spells, let's talk about our mastery. Our mastery Lifebinder says that healing done to allies is increased by mastery percentage while their health percentage is lower than your own. You always receive the benefits of your own mastery, so healing yourself will always give you more healing than normal, and if, let's say, you have 50% HP but somebody has 20% HP, yes, you will grant them mastery. It's Boolean logic, it's true or false. So if somebody has 70% HP and you have 50% HP, you will not give them mastery healing. On heal over time effects, the game will retroactively check to see if you have mastery. So when you hit a heal over time like this, if, say, all of these targets were healing and then you dipped below them in health, they would receive less healing. And it will work separately for different targets. So if one target's below you and one target's above you in HP, yes, it'll apply mastery to the one below you, but not to the one above you. Let's go over our 2 most important spells, starting with Echo. Echo is a 2 essence ability that costs a very small amount of mana, and when you place an Echo on a target, they will be healed for a small amount. And the next time you cast a spell, a direct healing spell, it'll also cast on the ally with the Echo at 116% of normal healing. And just note that other essence spells cannot be echoed. What this means is Chrono Flame, or Living Flame as you hear me say it very often, is our basic heal. I'll be going over in just a moment, but let's just echo this target, and then echo this target, and then we will Living Flame this target. And 3 versions of the spell came out. That means that it's 3 actual copies of that spell, meaning if there's a chance to give you something like this Essence Burst that I received that we'll be going over in a bit, it will roll the dice for each copy of that spell. This means that you can turn any single target heal into an AoE heal, and you can turn some of your AoE heals into double AoE heals, which is quite a powerful effect. Now, we can only really get 2 of these out though, at any given time very easily. So we do have another method of getting out echoes, and that's Temporal Anomaly. Now, Temporal Anomaly on its own is a roughly 10-second cooldown, and it's somewhere in the 15-second department if you're playing Flame Shaper, but we're on Chrono Warden, which reduces its cooldown. So this 10-second cooldown throws a projectile about the size of the moon, and it'll put a giant shield on, or not a giant shield, but a pretty big shield on 6 targets, and then it'll fall off rapidly for any other targets afterwards. However, the first 5 targets hit by your Temporal Anomaly receive an echo. This echo is at a reduced amount, and it maths out to, with our current talents, a 50% echo as opposed to the 116% echo that you saw earlier. This means that you can get it out without using any essence, and get it out on up to 5 targets very quickly, allowing you to do some very quick and very efficient AoE healing. But of course, this healing is a touch weaker just because of that 50% effect. But combine this with regular echoes, and you can get a lot of healing done very quickly. Note that a more powerful echo will never be overwritten by Temporal Anomaly. So if I echo all 3 of us here, and then I throw a Temporal Anomaly, note that I still have the 116, this mob still has the 116, this one also has 116, but the rest of them have this 50% echo. So if you just spend some time putting some big echoes on people and then throw a Temporal Anomaly, don't worry, your hard work won't be wasted in that situation. You'll still be getting out extra echoes. This is actually very useful in Raid as well. To give you some insight on what your rotation would look like, if I had to put it that way, is a lot of your rotation is going to be throwing out a Temporal Anomaly, maybe echoing anybody that you might have missed in that sequence, and then going and doing damage and waiting for something to happen, because these echoes last for upwards of 18 seconds on a target. This means that you have all the time in the world to get a heal down, throw another Temporal Anomaly, and continue doing things while you wait for more damage. If other targets take damage, you might echo them after that Temporal Anomaly to continue healing. So let's say I healed those targets and oop, this target took damage, this target took damage. Let me just heal them really quick. In order to use all of these echoes and Temporal Anomalies, we're going to want to know some spells. Let's go over 2 of our most basic spells, Living Flame and Reversion. Living Flame, or also known as Chrono Flame, if I ever say one or the other, I'm referring to the same spell, is a damage or a healing move depending on where you send it. If you send it at an ally, or an enemy, it'll go directly to the enemy and deal damage. If you send it at an ally, it does this cute little wiggle, and when it strikes them, it'll finally heal them. Living Flame is a little bit of a slow move, but it is a pretty chunky heal. When you combine it with other effects, it has a chance of becoming instant cast, you can reduce its cast time, and you can get a whole lot of these out very easily. So Living Flame is a go-to heal, and it's great when you don't want to tap into your other resources. Because as I mentioned at the start of the video, this move is the only one that you have that doesn't have a cooldown. It is always available to you. Reversion, on the other hand, has 2 charges with an 8.1 second recharge with my current haste value. It costs a small amount of mana, and it is up essentially all the time given it's the lowest cooldown move you have. This will put a heal over time on the target. Now, this heal over time, if it critically strikes, has a chance of gaining an extra 2 seconds on it for a maximum of 12 additional seconds. So it's on them for 15.6 seconds, and then it will last up to another 12 seconds depending on how many times it crits. This is one of the most loaded moves in the game. We're going to be talking about Reversion so much, so you might want to take some notes here. First things first, yes, Reversion is a heal over time. Anyone with that heal over time will have grace period. They'll receive 10% more healing. Reversion's ticking and healing people has a chance to give you that instant cast Living Flame. Instant cast Living Flames will light up on your hotbar, and they'll do 50% additional damage or healing, and you can get 2 stacks of this effect. So you might be able to throw 2 instant cast Living Flames back to back. Then onto the more complicated interaction, Golden Hour. Reversion instantly heals the target for 15% of damage taken in the last 5 seconds. That's actually why I've taken a moment to cast the spell. Here's what it looks like normally on a target, right? It'll just start giving you a heal over time, and now I'm receiving 10% more healing. However, these healing dummies are always taking damage, and thus when I hit them with a reversion, it produces an absurd number, like sometimes in the millions, and you'll see this 400,000 number, and don't worry, I'll explain that one too. 15% of damage taken in the last 5 seconds is just a number. The game looks at the player and if they've taken damage in the last 5 seconds. It doesn't care if they have a shield on, it doesn't care if they've been healed recently or you've healed them recently, nothing. When you hit golden hour, it heals the target and looks at the last 5 seconds, takes that number, and produces 15% of it as healing. This makes it the best way to heal a tank in the entire game. If your Death Knight just took their whole health bar like 3 times in a row, pop a reversion on them, have a nice day. Like, they'll be full health. It's really, really powerful. And yes, you can even go Echo Reversion to get 2 instances of 15% of damage taken in the last 5 seconds is healed back immediately. That's pretty powerful. In addition, if there are 2 reversions on the target, one echoed, one normal, yes, they will receive 20% bonus healing. Those heal over times will individually crit and extend their own timers. And then, to add to it, our Apex talents will additionally let our reversions protect allies, reversing 2% of all damage taken and healing them instead. There's so much going on with reversion. It is such a powerful move. And thus, you might be thinking to yourself, do I want this move up all the time? And the answer is yeah. It's never a bad idea to have reversions running. It gives you so many benefits. You might be saving them sometimes to save someone's life, but because of its short cooldown, you're going to have access to it very, very often. Also, if you're single target healing someone and they're starting to take a colossal amount of damage after they've taken said amount of damage and you're struggling to heal them, the Echo Reversion is going to do a ton of work for you, and that you're going to do a little bit of healing and then double the 15% of taken in the last 5 seconds. And if that's been a large amount of damage because they've been focused by a spell or something like that, you'll heal them back very, very quickly. Both Reversion and Living Flame have a chance to give you what's called an Essence Burst. It's a 20% chance on Living Flame and a 15% chance on Reversion. But as you might remember, all copied spells will count as a real cast of that spell. So there's a very high likelihood of you getting 1 or the maximum of 2 in a moment's notice whenever you cast Living Flame or Reversion with a lot of echo targets. And this will produce a mana-free, essence-free essence spell. So you can use this to get your mana back with Disintegrate, a small heal with Emerald Blossom, or an extra echo cast. And that echo cast is a big deal, that you can use this to kind of ramp your party up for a major healing event, saving the Temporal Anomaly for a follow-up heal. And that's a really powerful way for you to heal. And in fact, in Raid, that's kind of going to be a lot of the times how you set up massive healing setups. However, you can also still get them by doing damage by throwing Chrono Flames at enemies. So while you're doing damage, there's even a chance that you get an Essence Burst. And what makes this so important is that doing damage isn't going to proc your Echo. So if you have a big setup ready and you want to see if you can get an Essence Burst for 1 more, doing damage while you wait for all of your echoes is a great idea. And not to mention, remember what I said earlier, echoes last somewhere in the realm of 18 seconds. So you have a lot of time to try to get extra procs of this or to do some damage while you're waiting for healing. Essence Burst is a core part of your kit, and a lot of the times you're going to be getting them from reversions, because getting reversions on targets provides all those bazillions of buffs and some Essence Burst chance, and all those targets will be receiving extra healing. It's a shame I didn't get an Essence Burst right there, but it is only a 15% chance, rolling the dice so many times. But it's not uncommon to press Reversion and get 2 Essence Bursts when you're cashing out a lot of echoes. You're going to hear me say that a lot coming up, cashing out. Whenever you have echoes available for healing, or there's nothing really left to do with them, I like to refer to it as cashing out, and you'll hear me say it all the time. This is just a fun little term, but cashing out your echoes with reversions is a great thing to do if you're not sure what to do with your echoes. Your temporal anomalies off cooldown, and you're not sure what to do? Well, before you send it out, why don't you go press reversion? Get some heal over times running, get some instant cast Living Flames, get some grace periods, get that Marithra's Blessing Apex talent where it'll heal them for damage taken. All of that can be rolling while you send out your next wave of potential heals. Next up on our list is Verdant Embrace. Verdant Embrace is being reduced by my tier set right now, but currently it's a 14-second cooldown, and you will fly to an ally and heal them for a large amount, or you can cast it on yourself to heal yourself the same amount. Now, if you land a Verdant Embrace on someone else, you'll always do a little healing to yourself due to a talent called Panacea, but realistically, this is one of my favorite moves for cashing out echoes. If you have a bunch of echoes down on party members and you hit a Verdant Embrace, you'll do a lot of healing. Now, you might have noticed that a ghost came out of me, and that's because of this beautiful little talent down here. You can either play Dream Simulacrum, where your Verdant Embrace is 30% stronger, and it's no longer makes you dash, instead a ghost version of you will fly out and heal the target, or you can get 2 charges of Verdant Embrace. Both of these have uses, and they're very, very good heals. And given that with Chrono Warden, your Verdant Embrace is additionally a heal over time, and a rather potent one at that, you're going to find use for both of these talents. And it is going to be mostly preferential. Figure out what you want to use. Just note that the first time you fly at a teammate, you're going to die. Like, you're definitely going to press that in raid and forget that you took the 2-charge version and go flying across the room and blow yourself up on a mechanic, and it happens to all of us. But it is an additional movement tool when you think about it like that, and in a lot of ways that can be very helpful. But it has one other trick up its sleeve. Lifebind. This has changed from other versions of Preservation, so listen carefully. Verdant Embrace temporarily bonds your life with an ally, causing your healing on either partner to heal the other for 60% of the amount. It lasts 8 seconds. This can be great for saving your own life, saving a tank's life, saving anyone's life realistically. You're going to give them a Verdant Embrace, you're going to give them a large heal, and then Lifebind will activate, and you can heal yourself to heal them, you can heal them to heal you. It's incredibly flexible. That being said, as good as Lifebind is, it was nerfed. It no longer works through Echo. So while you can give everyone a Verdant Embrace for a massive heal over time, which is a pretty useful use of it, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to share heals with the whole raid with Lifebind anymore. It was a little broken, to be fair, but it's one of the major changes. However, if you do want to cleave heal 2 targets with it, Wings of Liberty giving you an extra charge means that you can Verdant Embrace one target, Verdant Embrace the other, and then proceed to heal yourself to heal both allies with no echoes needed. This can be incredibly useful, and it's very flexible, so pick whichever one you like and give it a whirl. But for beginners, yes, I do have you on Dream Simulacrum to avoid some untimely deaths while you're learning, and it is just a little bit easier with all of the information going on in Preservation Evoker. I figured this was the talent to go. Next up on our list is Dream Breath. Dream Breath is a 20-second cooldown. It costs a decent amount of mana, but this is an empowered spell. And empowered spells were new in Dragonflight featuring the Evokers, and now a few other classes have them. As you charge up an empowered spell, it changes what the spell does, and note that the move doesn't actually go on cooldown unless you truly use it, so if you interrupt the spell cast, it won't go on cooldown. Dream Breath is a heal over time. At level 1, it'll do a small amount of upfront healing, and then it's heal over time over a very large amount of time. If you charge it up though, you'll get more of that healing up front and less healing over time. This means that if you want to get a large heal over time effect, you could say throw out a Temporal Anomaly, and then hit a Dream Breath level 1, and now you have a long heal over time effect to work with. Combine this with some reversions, and yeah, you can get a double Dream Breath and a double reversion on someone, and now they have a bazillion heal over times running on them, cranking. This is a wonderful boon if you're trying to do a lot of single target or 2-target, 3-target cleave healing, and you want to make sure there's something in the background helping you out healing. However, let's say people are taking a large amount of damage. You could throw out a Temporal Anomaly, echoes a few people who are really hurt, then full charge that Dream Breath for a much larger burst heal. This is the flexibility of Dream Breath. You can use this to either set up a heal over time or quickly burst heal the party. And note that this is a smart heal, so in raid, if you're covering a large amount of the group with a Dream Breath and only 6 people are hurt, it's going to pick the 5 lowest targets to go heal. Also note that it always gives you a heal as well, so you're never going to be missing the heal over time effect, and this is very, very useful again for your mastery. Now, because we're Chrono Warden, we also send out some Chrono Flames that you might have noticed after casting the spell. This will heal up to 3 targets, so long as there are 3 targets actually in the cone, and they'll get Chrono Flamed. I think this move is supposed to smart heal, but recently I've seen it mess up the smart heal, so I don't know if it's working as intended right now, but typically speaking, those Chrono Flames seek targets that are taking damage and will heal them. I don't know if it'll heal separately from targets that are not receiving Dream Breath. That is something that is very, very hard to test, therefore I haven't tested it. But Dream Breath is a very versatile move, and you'll be using it often. Also note that because of a talent in Chrono Warden, our empowered spells will reduce a random amount of time off of them up to 6 seconds. So while this is only a 20-second cooldown, there are chances that this becomes a 10-something second cooldown within the blink of an eye. And while we're talking about empowered spells, let's talk about Fire Breath. You might be going, Bowser, you're talking about heals. Yeah, this is a damage spell, and it's an important damage spell, but with the way we're talented, it'll also do some healing for us, and there's a lot of benefits with this, so I figured it's worth going over here. Fire Breath is a 30-second cooldown, it doesn't cost very much mana, and it does a large amount of damage. It is reduced beyond 5 targets, And the more you empower it, the more the damage is up front. So if you tap fire this, you'll get a nice little baby amount of damage, and then of course the target will be on fire taking damage. And you saw it, some chrono flames came out of me as well, and that'll strike up to 3 targets that are in range of the fire breath. Fire breath's pretty cool. It does a lot of damage, but if you fully charge this thing up, it does a lot of damage up front. And yes, I'm warning you right now, you can and will rip threat off of a tank. At one point in time, they reduced the threat generation of fire breath, but they did so for devastation evoker, not for preservation. And because it also heals, it generates a lot of threat. So just keep that in mind. Hitting your tip the scales, which we'll talk about later, and then hitting fire breath is a very, very easy way to get all of the mobs looking at you when you maybe don't want them looking at you. So try not to pop this off in the first second of combat. Let your tank gather like a DPS would normally wait, and you'll be totally fine. But fire breath, because of Life Giver's Flame, will heal 5 injured allies nearby for 80% of the damage done, split evenly among them. So it's 5 targets of damage, 5 targets of healing up to, and it'll split it among them evenly. So if one person's hurt and there's 5 enemies in your way and you full charge of fire breath, you'll probably full heal the person. If everyone's taken damage and you do a full charge fire breath on a pack of enemies, you'll do a good chunk of healing. If there's only one enemy and you hit a fire breath and everyone on your team is hurt, congratulations, you might not even see the health bars go up. So in single target, you're not going to get a whole lot of use out of this, but as soon as there's 2 or more targets and maybe even 1 or 2 people that need to be healed, fire breath will do a large amount of healing for you. Now, if you're thinking about it, you might be right here. Yeah, the damage over time part of it also does healing. Now, this is a little more niche, but sometimes when I know I need a lot of healing over time, I'll do a rank 1 fire breath just to get more healing over time out on the party. This is especially useful if you're playing Flame Shaper, and will have some applications in AoE. However, a lot of the times you should just charge up your fire breath all the way. Do the most amount of damage you can possibly do if you roll the dice on some big crits, and it gives us a buff called Leaping Flames. The more you charge up fire breath, the more Leaping Flames you will receive. So I hit level 4, so you can't read this because my chat blocker is blocking it. Your next living flame will strike 4 additional targets. This counts as healing or damage, so if I target an ally and throw a chrono flame, you'll see that all these chrono flames, living flames, whatever, will hit other targets and allies that need healing. This also means that if you do it in damage, yes, you will be able to hit a bunch of targets in damage. So if I come over here, full charge this fire breath, right, do a large amount of damage, then I throw out these chrono flames, and there go the leaping flames, all to attack all these targets. It's quite a powerful tool, but there's a couple of interesting little tricks we can do with it. First of all, these leaping flames, if there's no other targets for them, they'll seek out allies. So let's say we're fighting a boss, full charge the fire breath, and then throw the leaping flame at the boss. The 4 other leaping flames or 3 other leaping flames are going to go find allies that need healing. So they're not going to be wasted unless there's truly no other targets for them to find. However, if you use the leaping flames on an enemy and some of them go to heal your allies, you did not directly heal. This means it won't break your echoes, not breaking your combo, so to say. And that's a really big deal. Having an alternative way to heal people via fire breath and leaping flames without actually targeting a player to heal them can be a boon in some scenarios. However, if you're in AoE, you're not going to be able to do this. But if you're in single target, there might be some really practical benefits to doing this. Like maybe a boss does a major amount of damage to allies, you could set up a huge amount of echoes, get some fire breath down, then hit a big leaping flames, then cash out all those echoes with another heal, then throw temporal anomaly, etc, etc. You might have noticed when I cast Dream Breath or other spells in this guide, you might have noticed that my reversion changed icons. That's because Dream Breath and our Essence abilities can grant us Marithra's Blessing. Spring a bloom of life from your target, healing them and up to 4 other allies within 30 yards for an amount. Blooms might heal your target multiple times if there's no other injured nearby allies for it to heal. Now this does replace reversion, but it also applies a reversion. And just like reversion, you can use it through some echoes as well. So it's entirely possible for you to bounce this move around the entire room, healing everyone in the process. Now, please ignore that large number. That's because of reversion and one of the apex talents that Marithra's Blessing grants us. We'll go over that later. Your essence abilities give you a chance at one of these, while your dream breath guarantees it. And note that not only does Echo and Emerald Blossom have a chance of giving it, but so does your Disintegrate, which is what we're going to use to get our mana back and do a little bit of damage. So you might be able to do some damage, convert that into a heal with Marithra's Blessing, full charge a Dream Breath to get some more healing down, get another guaranteed Marithra's Blessing, and then at a later date, maybe you ramp some of your teammates up with some Echoes and throw out that guaranteed Marithra's Blessing. This is a very cool part of Preservation's kit, but it is not the highest amount of healing that we have in our kit. So you're going to want to weave it in and use it effectively, but just note that it isn't like a replacement for Spirit Bloom, if you remember that spell, or anything like that. But it does heal in the background while you're taking other actions. And if you've ever been here for my priest healing guides, you know background healing is busted. Anything that's working for you in the background while you're doing other tasks is extremely powerful healing. And I would say Marithra's Blessing kinda leans into that category a little bit, which is quite nice. Now, with all of that basic information, we can kinda do a beginner's rotation, and I want to show you what that looks like. I say this as a beginner's rotation. This is a great way to just start learning preservation, as this general flow will teach you how the spec works. There'll be situations where this general rotation isn't the best way to play, but I think it's so good at teaching and it's applicable to so many scenarios, this is the best way to start. So, I like to start every single pull by getting a couple of Echoes down and getting some reversions rolling. It's easy to get 4 of these rolling in a moment's notice as the pull begins. You can even do it while moving around. And while you use your other spells, your essence will regenerate. So if you just used a bunch of Echoes to get a bunch of reversions out, you'll get them all back. So I will Echo, reversion, get all of those rolling. Then I throw a Temporal Anomaly. Then yeah, go do some damage. Full charge that Fire Breath, throw out your Leaping Flames, maybe hit a Disintegrate to get your mana back, and continue doing damage. And then, oh, what if somebody took damage? Pop a heal. Heal them up, throw another Temporal Anomaly, continue doing damage. This is a great way to establish a flow, get your mana back, continue using your resources, but because these Echoes last 18 something seconds on a target, you have a lot of time to cash it out, heal people up, and then let's say people are still hurting. Use some Echoes, reversions, or other healing spells you have available to top off those players. Then when Temporal Anomaly's back up, press it again. In fact, sometimes I'm lazy and I start the pull with a Temporal Anomaly, I hit reversion, and I stop thinking about it, and I wait for my next Temporal Anomaly to do major healing, using Echoes on anyone who gets hurt and healing them up with whatever's available. Now, while your go-to big burst heals are Verdant Embrace, instant cast Living Flames in a pinch, but the instant cast ones are quite good, and a full charge Dream Breath, yeah, those are quite powerful. You're not always going to have them available. Look, it is entirely possible for you to have no instant cast Living Flames remaining, no Verdant Embrace, no Marithra's Blessing, and all you got is a bunch of Echoes and a Fire Breath. Remember, use everything at your disposal. This full charged Fire Breath can turn into a bunch of instant cast Living Flames. That could give me Essence Burst. The Essence Burst could turn into more Echoes. Now my Verdant Embrace is off cooldown. I can use that. Targets are still taking damage. I could Echo some more of them. Throw a Dream Breath. My Temporal Anomaly is back up. Throw the Temporal Anomaly, maybe hit a big fat Chrono Flame on all of them, and then use those Essence Bursts to continue my healing and use this Marithra's Blessing to finish the job. Preservation Evoker does not have one answer. It has many correct answers, and it's up to you to figure out which heals you want to use. As you get into harder content, you'll go, I want to save Dream Breath to help me with this mechanic, or I know I'm going to need to use this cooldown on this mechanic, and thus you might lock yourself out of certain moves until the time is right. But a lot of the times, you can heal things with a plethora of options, and none of them are wrong. It's just about using them at the right time and using them correctly, deciding how often you want to use Echoes. And sometimes I'm not even using Echoes. There are times that I maybe blanket heal the group with Dream Breath, and then start using some Echoes, give out some reversions, and then send out the Temporal Anomaly for a larger burst of damage. That way, I don't feel like I need to use the Dream Breath there, and look, the Dream Breath's almost off cooldown, so maybe I can use it after the fact, and use the heal over time effect to help me out with earlier damage that maybe isn't what I'm initially planning for. If this sounds confusing, keep throwing Temporal Anomaly, and whenever Temporal Anomaly and you got nothing to heal, there's nothing to do, right? My recommendation is to always hit reversion, see if you get some essence burst, go back to doing damage. And you can do this forever. In fact, there's clips in some of my older guides of me healing up with temporal anomalies and getting all of my mana back from 0, like starting with next to no mana, restoring my mana while also healing, because it is that effective. There are going to be times that you can't really effectively do your damage, and so maybe you're just sending out a fire breath and returning to healing, but that's okay. Preservation has all the tools to get it done. You're the one who needs to balance it correctly. So the more you throw things out and practice playing with your different buttons, the more solutions you will find. Now I'm going to go over some of your damage basics, as we do have a lot of damage on preservation, and our damage does often turn into healing or resources for us, so it's very important to note. However, after you learn about damage, if you want to go run off and heal some basic stuff with some friends, I think you could. Just make sure you make it through the part where I talk about hover, and I think you'll be okay. But if you want to do harder content, there's a lot to talk about here, and we have many more buttons to go through, so we're going to go through all of those after we finish talking about damage. So, speaking of, we already talked about it, but Fire Breath is the biggest one to remember. Fire Breath is the majority of our damage, it's our hardest hitting move. Fully charging it will make us do more upfront damage. Sending it out at a level 1 or a level 2 will make it do more damage over time instead. Sometimes that has healing applications, especially with Flame Shaper. However, I typically say charge it up all the way every single time, because it's going to provide you leaping flames and a lot of benefit, but it is good to note that there are niche uses for it as well. It does have a 30-yard range. It is a little limited, but it's not too hard to line things up and hit them with a Fire Breath. Then you can send out your leaping flames afterwards for even more damage or some healing if only one target is present. We also talked about Chrono Flames or Living Flames, and this is actually your best single target damage outside of your Fire Breath. Just note that because of the slow cast time, sometimes it's better to use other spells because you're not going to be able to get a lot of these out. But because it has a chance to grant you an Essence Burst, this is an incredibly effective way to do damage. And note that the mana cost is fully refunded when you use it as a damaging spell, so there's no actual worries to using this and running out of mana. Next up on our list is Disintegrate. Disintegrate does less damage than just spamming Chrono Flames, but because it starts instantly in channels, sometimes it's a little easier to get this out than Chrono Flames, but most importantly, it's going to give us our mana back. It is possible to start burning through your mana bar now as Preservation Evoker, especially because this talent right here reduces our mana cost of some moves, but we don't necessarily need that anymore. So this can be a great place to tap in for some extra talent points, which is why I'm going to recommend Energy Loop to most players, as getting your mana back allows you to play as aggressively as you want and get all of your resources back. Now, Disintegrate does cost a whole 3 essence, making it a little expensive. However, Essence Burst will make that cost no essence, and the move itself doesn't actually cost any mana, so it is just completely mana positive on its own, and it will generate mana with that talent. One of the builds is going to take Titan's Gift. This makes your Disintegrate hit 35% harder if it's during an Essence Burst, and I just want to note that is more powerful than a Chrono Flame, but not more powerful than an instant cast Chrono Flame. However, sometimes you're saving your instant cast Chrono Flames to do healing, in which case Disintegrate's a good one to go for. If you're really confused as to which one to hit, if you have no care in the world, Chrono Flame's going to do more for you in terms of raw damage, but the difference between the two isn't too great. Disintegrate is instant, so sometimes it's a little bit easier to get off. If you have Essence Burst, you can actually chain these together, which is something you'll do on Devastation Evoker if you ever play that. It kind of looks like this. Right before the end, just press it again, and it'll do another cast of Disintegrate. But because this one gets you mana back, if you really don't want to think about it, just cast Disintegrate every once in a while to get your mana back and be happy. It's not too hard of a rotation, and if you're really lost in the sauce, you could just keep throwing Chrono Flames and do a whole lot of damage. Azure Strike is up next. This just hits 2 targets for a small amount of damage. It can be talented to hit 3 targets, but it's almost never worth it on Preservation Evoker. However, both your blue spells will slow the target, and this slow is actually quite potent. If you're a PvP player, by the way, and you want to really ruin something's life that doesn't have any D-slows, like a Demon Hunter, who's very limited in how often they can get rid of slows, oh man, highly recommend you just keep hitting Azure Strike and make their life miserable. That being said, the reason you use this on Preservation Evoker is to slow something chasing after one of your friends, or because you have to move and you just want to do a little bit of damage while on the move. There's no chance at an Essence Burst here, unlike Augmentation and Devastation Evoker. So it's only so good. However, if there is a fixated mob that's trying to kill someone, sometimes slowing the mob is a great thing that you can do, permanently slowing them by 50%, alongside maybe any other slows going off from, say, like a Frost Mage, is a great thing to have. So keep your Azure Strike around for repositioning and doing a little bit of damage, but this is a move that honestly you're not going to have to worry about very much. Okay, our final damaging move, and it's quite a powerful one, is Deep Breath. This is a 2-minute move that has you fly through the air and blast the targets down below you. During this process, by the way, you cannot be crowd controlled, you cannot be moved, you will deroot yourself. It's incredible. The only things that'll pull you out of Deep Breath are forced movement effects where the game requires you to be moved, and thus, like, you will get pulled out of the sky sometimes for that, but most of the time, entire mechanics can be avoided with a Deep Breath. Now, this is also a little loaded for us, as it's just a damage move and a very large one at that. If you want to use it like a damage move, especially in AoE, you should. It hits like a truck. It can be talented into a 3-second stun, which is really, really powerful, but I take this cheeky little talent over here, Stretch Time. While flying during Deep Breath or Dream Flight, which we'll talk about later, 100% of damage you would take is instead dealt over 10 seconds. If this sounds familiar, and you watch all of my videos, yes, it's going to provide you stagger for 100% of the damage you took. Now, you're really good at healing damage over time, so sometimes you can use this as a pseudo defensive or to get out of a problem, and if that problem gets you hit, you're probably going to survive. Just note that if you're taking a large amount of damage after you hit Deep Breath, something probably struck you during that time and has been applied via Stretch Time. So let's go back to our rotation a little bit. Instant cast Living Flames are one of our most powerful tools for damage or for healing, and part of the reason why we want reversions running all the time is for this flexibility. On the offensive side of things, instant cast Living Flames hit unbelievably hard. I'm hoping a proc will come up soon. Please, game. Please, game. I'll do anything, game. Please give me a proc. It's doomed. Okay, so this hits quite hard, right? That is a lot of damage, but it's also a lot of healing. So sometimes you're not going to want to use your instant cast Living Flames for damage. Sometimes you're going to want to use them for healing. In which case, yeah, go for Disintegrate. Use Disintegrate to get your mana back, do some single target damage, and keep your instant cast Living Flames available for if you want to do a large amount of healing to your party with an instant strong heal. That's why getting out all these reversions does so much for you. And I mentioned it earlier, I like to call it the double-double because I like putting names on things. But when you go echo, echo, reversion, reversion, you get out 4 echoes. I avoid hitting the tank with these when I'm setting up, but having these 4 running at the start of a pull without pressing Temporal Anomaly will grant you access to instant cast Living Flames probably around the time that people start taking damage, and then you can very easily and swiftly use it with the Temporal Anomaly to get a lot of healing done. This is what I meant by your damage kind of turns into your healing, and your healing kind of turns back into your damage. Your Fire Breath is the only thing that actually converts damage into healing. But having your resources dip into each other like this makes for fun feedback loops, and it's part of the reason why doing damage on Preservation Evoker is so important. Yeah, you do a significant amount of damage. Yes, healer damage does matter, and if you want to argue that one with me, stop by stream sometime. I will talk you under a table. I love that conversation. But doing your damage is going to grant you resources. Setting up your resources for healing will give you damage and healing, and vice versa. It's a very fun feedback loop. Now, the final thing to cap off this damage section is a very important move, Hover. Hover you have 2 charges of. With Blessing of Bronze, your raid buff, it goes to a 26-second cooldown, and this will have you either move in place or in a direction you are moving in. You will launch in that direction and start hovering. During this, you may cast while moving. Note that your empowered spells cannot be used while moving, but everything else can. Hover is really powerful. Yeah, and you can use it in place if you want to make sure that you get that buff for a mechanic, but you want to make sure you stay casting in place. And new to this expansion, by the way, you can cast Hover in the middle of other actions. So make sure that you can keep using Hover while doing damage or while healing. To add to this, the Hover buff does stack, meaning you can use both of your hovers back to back and have a large amount of time where you're flying around. And you might have noticed a few things. With Chrono Warden, we actually blink and warp somewhere. That is a true blinking effect, so you can use it to get over unscalable attacks that maybe you're supposed to take a teleporter for. Nah, you can just blink through it, which is rather fun. And it drops these little orbs. These little orbs will give an ally 30 seconds of 20% increased movement speed. This makes it a really nice movement ability as it helps you out and anyone nearby. It's also nice if you're playing in the range stack because you can give your ranged homie some movement ability so that they can get back into the arena a little bit faster. Before we end this beginner section, we need to talk about our most powerful external defensive, time dilation. This 1-minute move costs a very small amount of mana, and it stretches time around an ally for the next 10.4 seconds, causing 50% of damage they would take to instead be dealt over 10.4 seconds. One more time, this is Monk Stagger. You are giving somebody the stagger effect. However, 50% of damage taken being turned into a damage over time is unbelievably powerful. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Bowser, don't they take the damage anyway? Yeah, but we're extraordinarily good at healing people who've taken damage recently. This allows you to save a tank's life, make a brewmaster a double brewmaster. Just note that their stagger clearing effects only work on their staggered damage, not the ones that you've staggered for them. You can put this on an ally to save their life or get back to them later. Let's say all the DPS are dying. You can time dilate one of them to slow their death, then get to the other two, then go back to heal the one you time dilated. This is an incredibly powerful defensive, and in my opinion, the strongest non-invulnerability defensive in the entire game. The closest one that comes to it is Pain Suppression. Pain Suppression's on Discipline Priest. I think it's a 40% DR the last I checked, and it's a 3-minute cooldown. Granted, they get 2 charges of it and can reduce that cooldown by using their Power Word Shield, but it's just not up every minute, and yours is up every minute, which is what makes this so damn powerful. And just in case that's not enough, you can go grab this talent just in time. Time dilation gains an additional charge, and its cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds. I don't know what the dev team was thinking, but I love them. This is one of the most powerful talents we have. Now, I don't have it in the beginner's guide, and that's because I tend to get rid of Font of Magic to go pick up just in time. Font of Magic states that your empowered spell's maximum level is increased by 1. This is why you have a level 4 Fire Breath and a level 4 Dream Breath. If you think you can manage a level 3 Fire Breath and a level 3 Dream Breath instead, go swap this point out and go grab just in time. I just figured for the beginner's build, you might enjoy Font of Magic more, and it's not like you don't have time dilation by default, so you can still use it. It's also off the global cooldown, meaning that this move can be used while you're in the middle of other actions and cannot cast another spell. So time dilation is unbelievably powerful. Use it often, use it to save lives, and thank me later. This is one of my favorite spells in all of Preservation Evoker. With all this information, I truly think you can do some basic level content with your friends or pug in some normals and heroics. But if you're going to go into the mythic side of things, you really want to know what the rest of your buttons do, and that's what we're going to be focusing from here on onwards. I'm not going to be going over buttons that we've already talked about, so if you're in this section and you're like, hey, you didn't talk about Living Flame, I've talked about Living Flame this whole damn time, so you can go back and find it if you need it, but let's continue with the rest of the buttons. Another movement skill we have is double jump. Yeah, if you press jump in the air, you'll glide. Note that the burst of speed you get from it only happens the first time that you press the jump button in the air. You have to touch the ground to get that speed again. And you can reactivate it to continue gliding and have a safe fall. This is a great way to get around the arena. You can even use it to get around even faster with Strike from Above. Don't forget that you have double jump. Just note that if you play Drakthir on other classes, their version of glide is a little bit weaker than the one we get. Ours is very much meant to help get us around the room, the arena, wherever we are as fast as possible without jumping into our hover charges. So use this one wherever you feel you need it, and you'll be double jumping all over the place, I guarantee it. Our next external defensive is Zephyr. This is a 2-minute cooldown that makes an updraft happen, and you and your nearest 4 allies within 20 yards are sent up into the air, reducing the damage taken from area of effect attacks by 20% and increasing movement speed by 30% for 8 seconds. It sounds kind of fancy on paper, but all this does is make you lightly float above the ground and give you 20% avoidance. Now that avoidance is pretty important. Avoidance as a stat means that anything that's a bomb, floor bad, dangerous wind, anything like that, rain of arrow style attacks, all are avoidable and therefore you'll take less damage from them. However, this is really on a spell by spell basis, as a move like a Shadow Bolt Volley might be coded to be a bunch of single target attacks hitting the entire party. Sometimes though, it's coded like a Rain of Fire style move, and thus it actually is avoidable, so you're gonna have to just use this move and test it and figure out where it goes. There was actually a point of time in The War Within during Dawnbreaker where Rashanan did Acidic Spray, and this move put a dot on everyone. The dot that was on everyone, you couldn't dispel it, it just did damage and it stacked up. But it did a lot of damage at the start of the move, and that's because the start of the move was an AoE damaging effect. So you could Zephyr the dangerous wind coming off of Rashanan, but it wouldn't reduce the effect of the poison getting applied to everyone in the party. So this is a rather interesting defensive, and yeah, just send it out. Just send it out and see if it helps you survive something or not. And also in a pinch, if you really need the party to get moving, 30% movement speed for 8 seconds might be what gets you out of a bad situation, or help move your poor little warlock with no ability to go through a gate again to get across the room. Now let's go over our major cooldowns. These are going to vary in complexity, and they change a little bit whether we're using Chrono Warden or Flame Shaper, but because our beginner build uses Chrono Warden, we're going to go over Tip the Scales first, then we're going to dive into the more complicated cooldowns. We'll save the most complicated cooldown for last. So let's start with Tip the Scales. This is normally a 2-minute cooldown, but Chrono Warden is making it a 1.5-minute cooldown. Compress time to make your empowered spell cast instantly at its maximum empowered level. And on an easy breezy way to use this, just hit it with a Dream Breath whenever you need some quick emergency healing. However, you can use it on Fire Breath to do a massive amount of damage very quickly as well and get all of your leaping flames, so there's benefits to using both of them. However, Chrono Warden, this cooldown is quite strong. First of all, when you activate this, you're going to get a buff, Temporal Burst. Tip the Scales overloads you with temporal energy, increasing your haste, movement speed, and cooldown recovery rate by 30%, decreasing over 30 seconds. This means for roughly 20 or so seconds, you kind of feel like a god. Yeah, the movement speed helps, but the recovery rate and the flat haste that you get feels really good to use. In addition, after hitting Tip the Scales, Temporal Burst will grant you an Essence Burst every 6 seconds, meaning for a good 30 seconds, you're going to be getting tons of Essence Burst to really help you heal through a large healing event. So Chrono Warden gets essentially an extra cooldown with all of this power. I want to note when you hit Tip the Scales, both those buffs activate immediately, and now the move won't go on cooldown until I use said empowered spell. And that's important to note. Also, this means that at the start of a Mythic Plus dungeon, if you hit Tip the Scales before the keystone is activated, you'll actually get it refunded, meaning you can have a Tip the Scales ready as you walk into the dungeon, and you can get an instant heal or an instant amount of damage done, and you can still press Tip the Scales whenever you need it next. Cute little trick there. Our next cooldown is quite easy to use. This is a 4-minute cooldown with a 40-yard range called Rewind. Rewind rewinds 30% of damage taken in the last 5 seconds by all allies within range. Note that it's 100% stronger outside of raids in the dungeon environment, and it is the Save the Day button. When crap hits the fan, there is nothing better in this game than popping a Rewind. And this move will only do a lot of healing if people have taken damage. And while I need to play you a different clip because I forgot to record the last time I pressed this button, Rewind will pulse that healing over a couple of seconds. It really is just a few seconds, like I think it's like 2.5 seconds, but you'll see that it's like pulsing the healing here. So it won't instantly fix the problem, but it will very quickly fix the problem. Rewind will be assigned in higher level raids to a certain mechanic. Rewind will do a ton of work for you, but I oftentimes don't assign this to myself in dungeons. I usually use it in dungeons whenever the going gets rough and I absolutely need to catch back up. Also, sometimes in a horrible situation, you might use Rewind to save your tank's life. That's never a good feeling, but you know what? Sometimes that's the only thing left to do to keep the pull running, and if that's the only thing left to do, popping Rewind might just save your tank's life. Alright, our next major cooldown is one of two. I have you in Stasis, but Stasis is a little tricky to use, so we're going to go over Dreamflight first. Dreamflight is a 2-minute cooldown, which, just like Deep Breath, will launch you into the air, you're immune to crowd control effects, you'll remove all roots while using it, and everyone in your path will be immediately healed by an amount, and then a large heal over time over 15 seconds. It is reduced beyond 5 targets, but this is more viable in dungeons than you might be giving it credit for. So some people are going to opt into Dreamflight, and it's quite fun. But we need to talk about stasis, as this is the more difficult one to use, and I'm going to try to get you off on the right foot using it correctly, but you might need to play this section back if it sounds confusing. Stasis is going to lock in your next 3 helpful spells in a stasis, and when you reactivate it, it'll launch out those spells rapidly in succession in the way you put them into the stasis. It also will remember properties of moves, like I believe it will remember instant cast Living Flames and Leaping Flames, the level of empowered spell that you used for your Dream Breath, etc. Stasis is very, very powerful, but it can be a little weird, like how do you use this effectively? First things first, I like to use stasis by loading it with 1 to 2 really strong spells. My favorite of which is to load it up with, say, a full charged Dream Breath, and then maybe a Temporal Anomaly, although feel free to do this in the other order if you want. Now, stasis won't start its cooldown until you fully load it, so right now it's simply waiting for the final spell to go on cooldown. Now, I threw a Temporal Anomaly in there. I could put another Temporal Anomaly in there, but let's just end it with an Echo. That way I can use the stasis and not accidentally cash it out. So boom, I've hit it, and now for the next 30 seconds I can cast stasis, and its cooldown has officially started. So once this thing runs out and automatically depletes itself, it'll be 1 minute until it is back up. So you are not wasting any time by holding on to your now ready stasis. Now, what I do is I like to heal a damage event, a major damage event, with stasis running, the big Temporal Anomaly, the big Dream Breath, and then the next time I need to heal, press the button. This will unleash your heals and set you up for your next major healing event. Depending on how you load it up too, you might be able to really play into it. I could have done, for instance there, I could have started the pull with, say, a Temporal Anomaly, then unleashed the stasis, which started with a full charged Dream Breath. So the stasis, the Temporal Anomaly I just threw out is going to give out a bunch of echoes. Then those echoes will get used by the stasis's Dream Breath. Then the stasis unleashed a Temporal Anomaly and an echo, which means that I now can use those echoes to get more healing done. Then my Temporal Anomaly is probably off cooldown, and now I can use that with maybe a Dream Breath and fully charge that up for even more healing. So how do you use this? Well, I recommend just using it all the damn time until you're used to it. No, seriously, when you start a pull, start your major healing with a stasis running. Oh, people are taking damage. Pop stasis. Full charge the Dream Breath. Throw out a Temporal Anomaly. Put some Leaping Flames in there. Whatever you gotta do. Just let it exist. Then the next time you need to heal, let the stasis rip instead. And it will automatically rip at some point too, so if you hold on to it for too long, you'll just kind of let all the spells out of you in rapid succession, which can jump scare you if you're not ready for it, but it's pretty funny most of the time. But later in your life, when you're playing in harder content, you might commit stasis to a major mechanic, because you might need to do a lot of healing in that mechanic. So you can load up the stasis before the major mechanic and then use it during the major mechanic, or you can heal the major mechanic with the stasis running and then unleash the stasis right afterwards to then essentially double up on all the healing you just did. It's very creative, but there's a lot of things you can do in here. You can also fit a bunch of your Dispels in here, which is an incredibly unique thing you can do, but it's not always very useful. It doesn't always work the way you think it does, but if there's ever a bleeding mechanic that you can prep for and then unleash like 3 bleed Dispels at the same time, hey, you know what? That's a great little thing you have up your sleeve if you need it. Now let's talk about those Dispels really quick. Naturalize is your first Dispel. It's the standard 8-second Dispel like every other healer. All healers reduce magic effects off of a target, so if you naturalize a target with a magic Dispel, you'll clear that Dispel. In addition, you will also remove all poison Dispels. It just does poison on augmentation and devastation, but for you it additionally does magic. However, that's because we have the best Dispel in the game, Cauterizing Flame. This 1 minute cooldown will remove bleeds, poisons, curses, and diseases from the target and do a little bit of healing if it does. Now, just like a normal Dispel, it doesn't go on cooldown when you use it. So you can actually send out your Cauterizing Flame to see if something can be dispelled, and if it doesn't work, then you know it's not dispellable. That being said, it's a 1 minute, but it does everything, making it an unbelievably powerful tool that you have in your kit. Use Cauterizing Flame often. Use it to deal with 2 Dispels in rapid succession, and ultimately, you're going to be able to clutch up just a little bit more because you have Cauterizing Flame in your kit. So make sure to remember you have it. On to personal defenses. We already talked about time dilation, and remember that your deep breath will make you take 100% of the damage you take during deep breath over time instead. But if you're looking for a standard traditional defensive, Obsidian Scales has 2 charges. It's a 1.5 minute recharge. Reinforce your scales, reducing damage taken by 30%, and it lasts 12 seconds. This is a really powerful defensive, does the job. However, we also have Renewing Blaze. Obsidian Scales surrounds you with a Renewing Blaze, causing 100% of the damage it reduced to be healed back over 4 seconds. This means the damage that you're taking that Obsidian Scales is blocking will heal you, and the talent down below it will actually make it 4 seconds instead of 8 seconds. This means that popping Obsidian Scales will, in fact, keep you alive through some damage over time events a little bit better, but because it's only the reduced damage, it's not as strong as the older Renewing Blaze. And thus, if you don't feel like it's the most powerful effect in the world anymore, you can move these 2 talent points somewhere else if you feel you need the extra talent points elsewhere. But it's important to note that you have it. Obsidian Scales is nice, and remember, your mastery depends on you having more health than others. So sometimes that Obsidian Scales is exactly what you need to heal other people more. We also have a raid buff. I did talk about this earlier. The Blessing of Bronze. Weave the threads of time, reducing the cooldown of a major movement ability for all party members and raid members by 15% for 1 hour. This is what makes your hover a 26-second recharge instead of a 30-second. And note that it doesn't treat all the classes very fairly. For instance, it gives Priest Leap of Faith cooldown reduction, where they grip someone, which isn't always the most useful. And Shamans, Resto Shamans will get Spirit Walker's Grace, which allows them to cast while moving. I have no idea who hurt the Priests so much, but you know what? Shamans are at least eating the best from this buff, so wahoo. But this is a nice one. And also, all the spells that Blessing of Bronze helps are the same spells that Time Spiral will help. Time Spiral is a 2-minute cooldown, bending time, allowing you and your allies within 40 yards to cast their major movement ability once in the next 10 seconds, even if it's on cooldown. This is an awesome spell. You can bring it to dungeons, you can bring it to raid, and it's very versatile in giving you more movement. But remember, your hover stacks, so you can do things like pop the blessing, right? Hit Time Spiral, hover, hover, hover. And now I have upwards of 30 seconds of cast while moving time, which is pretty incredible. Now let's go over our crowd control. I do want to note that we did lose our interrupt, so we no longer have an interrupt, and this is the thing I am begging Blizzard to give us back the most. So if you're wondering where Quell went, Quell is missing, but Quell was like a 40-second cooldown interrupt that stopped a spell from casting, but you don't get it anymore. I'm so sorry. So let's go over the rest of our crowd control abilities, starting with Wing Buffet and Tail Swipe. Wing Buffet is a blast of cone in front of you that'll knock enemies backwards. Tail Swipe will knock up enemies around you, sending them up and slightly outwards. Now, they're both 1 minute with the way we're talented, but if you really need an extra point up here, you can make Tail Swipe a 3-minute cooldown to, have extra talent points to play with, but I don't recommend it. One thing you need to know about Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet, though, is that these are knockups and knockbacks, which means they don't have a diminishing return. If you keep stunning a target over and over and over again, eventually you're not going to be stunning it for very long anymore, and you won't get 3 seconds or 5 seconds of stun, you'll get like 0.2 or something like that. Knockups and knockbacks never get reduced by this. So this means that if you see a augmentation evoker knock up a bunch of enemies, yes, you can jump up and hit them with a tail swipe and send them to the moon. It's awesome, but it's one of the major benefits to knockups is that they have no diminishing returns, which is also why they're fairly limited in how many classes get them. But these two are very useful, keep them handy, and use them often. I already mentioned that Terror of the Skies makes your deep breath a 3-second stun. This is quite powerful, so if you end up using this, feel free to run it. I've been avoiding it because sometimes stunning mobs when your allies are trying to gather them up can be a little annoying, and I don't need that many pieces of crowd control, so I haven't always been running it, but if you want it, you should run it. Then we have Sleepwalk. This is mostly a PvP ability, and note PvP players, it doesn't have a cooldown anymore, so it's by default, it's able to be cast multiple times in a row, but Sleepwalk will make the target walk at you for 20 seconds, and significantly less if you're playing in PvP. Now, they fall asleep and walk towards you. That is really important, as you can use this to move mobs out of the way for certain skips, and you can get quite close to a sleeping enemy without getting aggro on it. So Sleepwalk's a pretty powerful ability. Now you also have Landslide. Landslide is a 1.5 minute route. It has a pretty large range, and yeah, it'll root enemies, and both Sleepwalk and your Landslide are broken by damage. But note that this one will give you aggro. So you can't just landslide a patrolling enemy and then hope to walk past it freely. It will get mad at you. However, Sleepwalk will work on a patrol, so long as the mob is crowd controllable. Rescue's crowd control, right? Rescue's crowd control. This is a 1 minute that lets you pick up your ally and move them somewhere. It'll clear you and them of movement impairing effects, and if you get the talent down below, they'll have 100% increased movement speed for 3 seconds and can cast while moving for 3 seconds. This is a cool talent, however, it's no longer a defensive, so I'm not using it all the time. I mostly use Rescue to, and I'm not kidding, move DPS out of range into range, and I highly recommend that you do it too. Rescue is useful for that, and it can be used in a couple of skips as well, but I guess it's crowd control. I guess we could talk about it like crowd control. Also, all of your ice spells slow, so both your Disintegrate and your Azure Strike will slow the target by 50%. Again, this can be very useful for stopping someone from chasing down your teammate, whether that's in PvP or that's a fixated mob. Both are incredibly useful. The final piece of tech that we have in our kit is a Pressing Roar. A Pressing Roar is a 2 minute cooldown, and it can be sent all the way back down to a 1 minute 30 second cooldown. However, this makes targets that hear the Pressing Roar receive 50% additional crowd control duration. Yes, this means you can put someone to sleep for 10,000 years in PvP. This means that you can stun targets for almost 5 whole seconds with your Terror of the Skies Deep Breath. This can make Hammer of Justice, I think, what, like a 7.5, or Hammer of Justice? Yeah, Hajj. It can make Hajj a 7.5 second stun. This is a really strong talent. However, you're likely going to use it with a team that asks for you to use a Pressing Roar somewhere. If you pick up this talent and want to use it in like a pug dungeon, just send it with another crowd control ability or at the start of a pull once things are gathered, as a lot of tanks will start using their crowd control abilities once the mobs are gathered to kind of set the rhythm of crowd control, so you might as well make that more effective. But a Pressing Roar is here in case you want it. Overall makes it remove an enrage effect from every enemy struck. However, it only removes one enrage effect off of a target, and this is only helpful if there's a lot of enrage effects. So there have been entire seasons where Overawe just wasn't really worth talenting into, but in case we ever get a season where there's like a bazillion enrage effects, this might actually be super useful, but a 1 and 30 second de-enrage is only so good. It is an AoE de-enrage though, so when it is useful, it's incredibly useful. Finally, we have access to Bloodlust, called Fury of the Aspects. It's a 5 minute cooldown, but it will apply the 10 minute exhaustion buff to all who receive this buff. This is very powerful. You'll hear Heroism, Bloodlust, Time Warp, Primal Rage. It's a that spell, and they're all essentially the same, but ours is better. You want to know why? Yeah, 30% haste for all party members is the same across all of these spells, but ours gives us the power of Rainbow Dragons, and Rainbow Dragons are top tier. So realistically, ours is the best, and if anyone tells you otherwise, they're wrong. There is a spell that I missed, and you might be wondering why I haven't talked about it, and that's Emerald Blossom. Emerald Blossom is an essence spell that costs 3 essence, a decent chunk of mana, and then after a moment, it pops and heals up to 5 targets in the area if you're talented for it. Otherwise, it heals 3. And I do believe it's smart heals, so it does try to find targets that actually need healing, and it won't waste itself on targets with full HP. Now, Emerald Blossom does have purpose. It's typically used in a Blossom build that Flameshaper can run, taking all of these talents that send out these fluttering seedlings and produce extra Emerald Blossoms. It is a very cool setup, but it's a little more niche, and if you want to explore it, it is fun, but it's not that great of a button. It does provide us a buff that I figured I should explain now. Both your Verdant Embrace and your Emerald Blossom will grant you an Ancient Flame. This makes your next Living Flame cast time reduced by 40%. It won't be consumed on an instant cast Living Flame either, so you can stockpile this and hold on to the buff forever. Yeah, forever. So when you're in PvP, sometimes I just pop a Verdant Embrace before the match starts to make sure I have this buff. Now, sometimes it is worth dropping a blossom or a couple blossoms in melee if you want to do some healing while on the move and there's nothing really bad happening and you don't have anything else to use your essence on. Getting it every once in a while just to make sure you get your Ancient Flame buff without using Verdant Embrace is also a fine application of it, but it's just not a very useful spell unless you're running the talents that make it more powerful. That's why I haven't really talked about it this whole time, but I figured I'd mention it here, especially as we're about to start talking about all the talents in the game. The final spell that I'll talk about, other than like you have a standard mass return revive as a preservation evoker, you have Soar, which launches you off the ground and turns you into a skywriting mount, which is awesome and a 10 out of 10 way to get around the map. However, we have Visage. Visage swaps you between your Drakthir form and your Visage form, and while I will endlessly beg Blizzard to give us more Visage forms because I would like to be a panda as a Visage, that would make my day, here's the thing. It says that it significantly increases out of combat health regeneration. It's not anything important. I don't even think about this buff. It's not that good, it's not that optimal. And as per usual in tradition on this channel, realistically, I don't want to be in my normie form, I want to be a dragon. And if you're going to come into my comments section and tell me, but Bowser, I don't want to be a dragon, too bad. Skill issue. You'll get over it, bestie. I have this button on my bars because sometimes you land somewhere and your Visage form will pop out of you because it resets your instance or something about you, start of arena matches. So I have it here to literally get back out of Visage and turn back into a dragon, because being a dragon's top tier. All right, welcome to the longest section, or one of the longest sections. We're going to go through the talent trees. Now, there's a lot to talk about here, and I'll have the different sections down below. So if you just want to know about the Apex talents or just preservation talents, go for it. But I am going to go through everything, but if I've already talked about the spell in depth, I'm not going to really dive into it here. And if there is something specific I want you to know for raid or for PvP, etc., I'll make mention of it here. Let's start with the Evoker side of the tree. By default, you get Expunge and Verdant Embrace. However, I always take Landslide and Natural Convergence, Obsidian Scales, and Heavy Wing Beats as extra defensives. Defensives are very useful. Landslide's kinda useful, but Disintegrate Channeling Faster is a time save, and let me tell you, time saves equal more healing, and so this is almost always being taken. There are some builds that will avoid this, but realistically, time save is healing, and never forget that. Verdant Embrace is here. Here's Scarlet Adaptation. Store 20% of your effective healing up to an amount. Your next damaging Living Flame consumes all stored healing to increase its damage dealt. You're never going to really have to think about Scarlet Adaptation, but it does do quite a bit of extra damage for you. Here's where your Living Flames just do 6% more damage and healing. That's a 2-pointer. Your extra charge of Obsidian Scales. Innate Magic. I always got to talk about this one. Essence regeneration is 5% faster. Great, it's 10% at rank 2, but your essence regeneration is based on haste. So if you have a very low amount of haste, which I typically do on preservation, this is only so useful. Now, in raid, this is a little more useful, and you might want to move some points over here, but like, you're really not missing a whole lot. You're so essence burst pilled anyway that you're not typically getting a whole lot out of this, but sometimes you might go, you know what, I do need that extra essence for raid to get out a few more echoes a little bit easier. Yeah, then there it is, and that's what you'll do with it. Down here, your Living Flame and Emerald Blossom are 30% more effective on you. This is incredibly useful if you're healing someone with Lifebind, by the way, or just healing yourself up. If you're like, oh man, I need to max out my health bar, just Living Flame yourself. If you got the time, hit a Living Flame, you'll do a bazillion healing to yourself. Ancient Flame is located right here. Down below it is Instinctive Arcana. Your magic damage is increased by 4%. I recommend this and take this because more damage is fun, but if you're ever strapped for talent points and need to grab a few extra things, start with Instinctive Arcana, as even with 4% less damage, you're still going to be hitting quite hard as preservation, and in raid, you don't typically need the damage, so this is the first place to go and grab some extra points. Recall's super fun. You may reactivate Deep Breath within 3 seconds after landing to travel back in time to your takeoff location. I do believe this also works with Dream Flight, which is incredibly fun. It's mostly a PvP thing, but you might find in raid that you really need to get out of dodge super quickly, and this is how you get out of dodge very quickly. I'm going to Dream Flight the entire party and then immediately warp back to where I'm supposed to be so I don't get killed. Yeah, that's always very useful. And I do believe that Dream Flight, yeah, it also gets the stretch time effect. So if you're using Dream Flight, you can survive a large amount of damage, heal the whole party, and then warp back to wherever you started to be in a better position. So it's a cool talent, but like I honestly don't take it very often, but I want to mention it. Landslide's cooldown was reduced by 30 seconds and can withstand 200% more damage before breaking, mostly a PvP thing. Almost all the time this is a PvP talent because a 1 minute landslide and having it work a little bit better as like a true route can be quite nice. Tailwind Hover increases your movement speed by 70% for the first 4 seconds. This is rad, it's very fast, it's not really needed, we're already kind of quick, but it is very fun. Here's where Cauterizing Flame is, Sleepwalk is right here down below it. Your healing done and healing received are increased by 6%. Attune to the Dream is pretty giga, I'm almost always taking that because again it really helps with your mastery. Tip the Scales is located right here and it connects to like a million nodes. I'll talk about all these nodes, but here's where Azure Strike hits an additional enemy, which is not really worth it. And there's 2% leech down here. Now, someone's going to say it in the comments, so I have to say it here. Leech is good on healers because 2% of your healing is also leeched onto you, as well as your damage healing you too. But I'm going to be real with you. It ain't worth 2 talent points to get 2% leech. No, it's not. It's just straight up, it's not worth it. You can attach leech to other pieces of gear, and you really don't need leech to get the job done. So I'm letting you know it's here, but I'm not here to argue with people in the comment section about 2% leech. It ain't worth it, homie. Magic damage reduced by 8% right here. Stamina increased by 6% right here. Hover lasting 4 seconds longer is nice. If you need an extra talent point, you can reduce this and attach via Bountiful Bloom. Emerald Blossom will heal 2 additional allies, making it 5 targets. But I think the extra flight time is worth it more often than not. But if you're strapped for points, that's something that you can do to get a little more mileage out of the tree. Down below, Fire Breath's damage over time lasts 4 seconds longer. While above 75% health, your movement speed is increased by 10%, which is fun, but not necessary. Renewing Blaze is right here. Foci of Life is right here. Walloping Blow, Wing Buffet, and Tail Swipe knock enemies back further and daze them, reducing movement speed by 70%. You take this because you want a longer and further knockback. A daze sounds like it might be an additional crowd control effect. A daze is a slow in World of Warcraft terms. So yeah, 70% slow for 4 seconds is nice, but if you ever take this, it's for a heavier knockback or knockup, not because you're going to slow them. Again, kind of a PvP talent. Panacea is why your Emerald Blossom and Ver Embrace will always be healing you a little bit, even if you use them on allies. Here's where Stretch Time is. Flying during Deep Breath, 100% of damage you take is instead dealt over time. Unravel, direct damage from Fire Breath consumes absorb shields from enemies, dealing 14,000 additional Spellfrost damage to them. This used to be a separate button. It's now just attached to Fire Breath. It's very cool. If there's a lot of shields, this might be worth picking up. Oppressing Roar is located here. We just said Foci of Life. Rescue is here. Twin Guardians down below it. Note that Twin Guardians is no longer a defensive. It just increases the movement speed you get after rescue and allows you to cast while moving for 3 seconds. Lush Growth, green spells reduce 10%, green spells restore 10% more health. Zephyr's down here, the external. Overawe for Oppressing Roar is here. Strike from above makes you 10% faster, and the height by 10% of your glide is increased. I said that in like the backwards order, you know what I mean. Here's where Terror of the Skies is. I need to talk about these buffs, we're gonna get there in a second. Time Spiral we went over, right? 2-minute cooldown that gives you a movement ability and everyone else a movement ability. Very useful. Very always useful actually. The choice node over here is a 3-minute Spatial Paradox. Evoke a Paradox for you and a friendly healer, allowing casting while moving and increasing the range of most major spells by 100% for 10 seconds. Honestly, you're never taking this unless your raid leader tells you. I mean it. You use this for specific engagements or situations where you know you need it, as it's going to let you cover one mechanic. In dungeons, it's almost never useful. So, I always say take Time Spiral, and if you need a Spatial Paradox, assign it somewhere, and then feel free to use it. Now, Source of Magic is a buff for healers. Unfortunately for you, you cannot put it on yourself. So this is exclusively a battleground and a raid kind of environment thing. Source of Magic redirects your excess magic to a friendly target for 1 hour for a friendly healer. When you cast an empowered spell, you restore 0.25% of their maximum mana per empowered level, meaning you frequently get 0.75 or 1% of their maximum mana. It's a nice amount of mana regen. It is very useful for specs that struggle with mana, but down below, the Source of Magic target also gets 3% damage and healing increased. Oh yeah, that's pretty nice. So always take this in raid. If you play Dev or Aug, always leave the house with this and give it to your healer. Now let's go over to the preservation side of the tree. here's where Echo is, Dream Breath, Reversion, Rewind, Essence Burst, 2 Essence Bursts, Life Bind, and Time Dilation. We already talked about all of those, but here's Temporal Compression. Each cast of a bronze spell causes your next empowered spell to reach maximum level in 10% less time, stacking up to 4 times. This is why sometimes you cast faster. This is also why your Blessing of Bronze has a 15-second cooldown on it. It's because that does technically count as a bronze spell. So Temporal Compression is very useful. There's also a talent down here that consuming a full Temporal Compression gives you an Essence Burst. So I just want you to know what this does before we talk about that. Moving on, Unshakable is a very interesting one. Your empowered spells are 10% more effective, and while charging a healing empowered spell, you cannot be knocked back. Now, you can cheese a knockback. Let's say a mob is about to knock everyone away. Start channeling Dream Breath. The knockback happens, you don't go flying, and then you can cancel the Dream Breath. That's right, baby, we can parry a knockback. It's not always useful, but I do want you to know about it. Unshakable then leads into Spiritual Clarity, which used to affect our now dead Spirit Bloom. Dream Breath's cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds. Moving over here, Fluttering Seedlings and Field of Dreams. When you hit Emerald Blossom, you send out these little seedlings that'll heal people. It's useful, it's cool, but it's a little more useful when you're actually running a Blossom build. It's not very useful in builds that don't fully lead into the Blossom mechanic. Every other Emerald Blossom has a 100% chance of making a Fluttering Seedling grow into a new Emerald Blossom. This is why you can get so much use out of Blossom. It's because you're getting all these bonus ones, which are all sending out a bunch of these Fluttering Seedlings. So it's a nice setup, but again, mostly a niche raid build, not something you're going to use all the time. Here's Font of Magic, which is why your empowered spells go to level 4. And as a reminder, I like to remove this talent and place it over here if you so choose, if you want more defensives. Here's where Golden Hour is. Here's where Just in Time is for that extra time dilation charge. Now, I just want to note, this is the best talent for this choice node. Delay Harm, 15% of delayed damage from time dilation is absorbed. This is only useful if you're assigning your time dilation to a lethal tank mechanic. This is kind of a mythic raid / world record pushing angle where you go, you know what, the tank can survive if we use Delay Harm. So it's ultra niche. You never want to use this over Just in Time because you're going to get way more value out of an additional charge and less cooldown rather than a measly 15% of delayed damage is absorbed. 15% of damage absorbed by the time dilation, mind you, which is why if it's something that's going to do like 150% of the tank's health bar, Delay Harm might be exactly what the doctor ordered to keep the tank alive. Here's where Temporal Anomaly is, and down below is Resonating Sphere. We're always taking Resonating Sphere. Nosdorma's teachings is really fun. Temporal Anomaly reduces the cooldowns of your empowered spells by 5 seconds. There might even be a raid build where this is decent, but it's never been better than Resonating Sphere, and a lot of people have tried to tell me that it's good. I think it is fun, a little niche, and usable in a lot of dungeon levels and raids on easier content, especially when you're out gearing the content, but I don't think it's ever better than Resonating Sphere. If you want to experiment with it, go for it, but Resonating Sphere has just been better every time. Also note, it says it applies Echo at 30% effectiveness, but because we have talents that make our Echo replicate more healing here and there, that's why this one is at 30% and why it turns into a 50% Echo on Temporal Anomaly while under Chrono Warden. Flow State, I really got to talk about this one. This is an entire build. You can run machine gun builds still if you liked playing Preservation in Season 3 of The War Within. Flow State's awesome. Flow State is still worthwhile, but because it's a little more niche of a playstyle, I'm not throwing you under the bus with it just yet. Empowered spells cause time to flow 5% faster for you. It's 10% at max rank, increasing movement speed, cooldown recharge rate, and cast speed, lasting 10 seconds. Flow State is awesome. This is a really, really fun talent, but you got to give up 2 talent points to get here. And oftentimes it's got to be from the lower section of the tree. That doesn't make it bad. It just means that it's a really, really, really important talent that requires some sacrifice. If you want to get experimental but stay viable, it's going to be Flow State. Flow State enables some really fun and really aggressive playstyles. And you don't need any haste on Preservation Evoker for a lot of its builds, and this is one of the reasons why the machine gun build doesn't need any haste, because, well, you're constantly getting 10% flat cast speed and cooldown recharge rate. which is way better than the haste stat. Haste stat or any stat will have diminishing returns at a certain point, whereas raw stats just go right into the stat without calculating for diminishing returns, which is why flow state and things like bloodlust end up feeling so good. Power Nexus increases your maximum essence to 6, more of a raid talent. I never really bring this in dungeons because you don't really need it in dungeons, but if you're over relying on essence burst and using lots of echoes on your party, then yeah, you might run Power Nexus. Exhilarating Burst by the Seed talents makes it so that when you have an essence burst, your critical heals are 230% effective instead of the usual 200% for 10 whole seconds. Listen, you get so many essence bursts, this buff can be up all the damn time. And during your Tip the Scales window, it literally will be up all the time for that entire window. If you get a lot of crit, which we do scale very nicely with crit, and I'm going over stats in a later section, just note, this is very strong if you have a large amount of crit. So don't forget about Exhilarating Burst when you're theory crafting. Your Spiritual Clarity again, Call of Ysera has been reworked, and thank goodness, I might rant for a second. Dream Breath healing is increased by 20%, and Living Flame healing is increased by 30%. This is now just a passive. It used to be that casting Verdant Embrace made your Dream Breath 40% stronger and your Living Flame 100% stronger for the next use of it. The problem is this tethered your Verdant Embrace to the Call of Ysera buff, which is unbelievably annoying because if you wanted to decouple your Verdant Embrace from your Dream Breath, it was very hard to do so. I'm happy that this is a passive, and with the changes to our kit, Verdant Embrace being uncoupled from Call of Ysera is a really nice change. So I'm happy to see this here, and you're basically going to take this on every build for the most part because it's such a damn good talent. Here's our choice node for Dreamflight and Stasis. Here's where Grace Period's located. Exhilarating Burst, or not Exhilarating Burst, Spark of Insight works with Temporal Compression, that when you consume a Temporal Compression, you get an Essence Burst, more of a raid talent, but can be a very nice one. Ouroboros is an infinite buff. It'll stay on you forever until it's consumed. Casting an Echo makes your next Blossom 30% stronger, stacking 5 times. This means that after a little bit, you have an Echo that's going to heal quite a bit harder. This talent is certifiably okay. It's not the best talent in the game, but there are ways to make it work. It used to be a lot more powerful, especially when you used to be able to Echo an Emerald Blossom, but because you can't anymore, this feels a little weak, and I ultimately don't grab it much anymore, but it's at least nice and I can tell you about it. Life Giver's Flame that allows our Fire Breath to heal people is right here. And here's a new one, Inner Flame. Casting Dreamflight or Stasis increases your healing over time by 60% and causes Living Flame and Reversion to have a 100% increased chance to grant an Essence Burst. Lasts 15 seconds and it lasts 20 seconds if you use Dreamflight. And just note that's because of the cooldown length on the move is why that talent is longer with Dreamflight. And also it's just better with Dreamflight because when you activate Stasis, your healing over time is better versus when you hit Dreamflight, the heal over time it produces more effective. So it's a little clunky to use with Stasis. It can work, it's a little weird. That being said, this is going to be a Giga Raid talent. Just 60% increased healing over time. Oh my god, with your Grace Periods, your Marithra's Blessings, your Dream Breaths, oh my goodness. This is a unbelievably good talent for Raid and will likely be the lifeline of your major healing events with a cooldown. Temporal Artificer makes your 4-minute rewind a 3-minute in case you really want to use your rewind a little bit more often. Here's where Energy Loop is. Again, I'm not leaving home without this right now with the way we currently build. And the reason for that is Timeless Magic, Reversion, Time Dilation, Echo, and Temporal Anomaly lasts 30% longer and costs 30% less mana. This is the easiest place to grab a point. If you want a talent point to play around with, right, and grab something else, this is where you can do it. And if you're feeling really risky, you can take 2 points. I like this, but it does come at a cost of a severe amount of mana. You're going to run out of mana a lot easier. But if you're cool with not taking any of these talents, and I'll explain why you might, that's more talent points for you to play with. In fact, if you're trying to run a flow state build, there might be something there. However, it's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous, which is why the beginner's build takes Timeless Magic, but Energy Loop is so good in dungeons. It's even good in Raid. If there's ever downtime in Raid, you can just restore an ungodly amount of mana and then continue pumping on all cylinders. So I really like Energy Loop, but in Raid builds, especially if you're trying to find another talent point, this is one you can usually move around. Time of Need is one of my favorite spells, and it's a passive. It just activates when somebody falls below 30% health. A version of yourself enters the timeline and heals them. I want you to ignore the tooltip here because it doesn't really explain the whole thing. Your alternative self comes out of a portal, Verdant embraces the person who's low, and then spams Living Flames. No, I don't think this gives you any of the buffs of Living Flame or Verdant Embrace or anything like that. It doesn't give you Essence Burst, but it is a very nice clutch heal. Remember what I said earlier, and all of you who like my Holy Priest guides, background healing is busted. Anytime something is healing for you in the background, it is very strong. This is a really strong talent, and it can activate every 60 seconds. This will just remove the burden of somebody dying on you and can help save someone's life while you're doing something more important. This is actually one of my go-to favorite pugging talents in the whole game. The only reason I don't have it here is that when you're learning, I think some of the talents I've selected here are a little bit easier to work with, but if you ever just need a little bit more clutch factor, Time of Need is that clutch factor. Okay, let's move down a row. Renewing Breath. During breath healing is increased by 15, then 30%. Great. Red spells deal 40% additional damage and healing, which is why your Living Flame hits like a truck now. If you were curious why Living Flame was such a better heal, and it was always a good heal, people used to tell me how bad it was, and it was worse, but damn. Anyway, Life Force Mender makes it quite strong. And then over here, Timeless Magic, we just talked about that. Let's go to the final row. Tempo Charged. Your bronze healing and absorption increased by 15%. Now, as of my last time testing this in the beta, this doesn't affect certain things like the Chrono Flame additional healing, which we'll talk about in a bit. It affects your reversion, heal over time, and it affects temporal anomalies absorption rate, but it doesn't affect things like Golden Hour. And I think that's a bit disappointing. It doesn't feel like it's as strong as it could be, and I almost wish this was a little bit more powerful if they don't want to grant it extra benefits from, say, things like Grace Period and whatnot. So Tempo Charged, it's good. I'm probably going to take it in raid, but in dungeons, I can safely just avoid it because I just don't think you really need it. Over here, this is great for Blossom builds and great for Flame Shaper. Casting an Emerald Blossom causes your next Echo to cast on an additional ally within 25 yards at 100% effectiveness. And remember, Emerald Blossoms are not going to affect your Echoes, so by dropping Blossoms and consuming Flame off of people, you're going to be getting more Echoes out. So this is a really, really nice talent, and it also feeds well into Ouroboros if you end up running that as well. So it's a good one, but it's a bit more niche. Life Spark is why your reversions have a chance to give you up to 2 instant cast Living Flames that hit 50% harder damage or healing. That's where that is. Titan's Gift is one I take all the time because Essence Burst, increasing the effectiveness of your next Essence ability by 35%, does affect how much echo healing you do, like how much the echo echoes, which is pretty powerful. It will make your Blossom a little stronger, but it makes your Disintegrate hit like a truck. So I really like Titan's Gift, but that extra healing on echoes goes a really, really, really long way. So if you find that you're often able to ramp people up with your echoes, this is a really good talent to go for because it's gonna provide you even more healing. But it's a bit more aggressive, and if you want to play on the safer side, you can use this talent point elsewhere. Now, this is also optional. There's a world where you don't run Dream Simulacrum or Wings of Liberty. I already talked about this in the beginner section, but I really like them, and they both have their uses on both Chrono Warden and Flame Shaper. So figure out what's right for you. Just don't be scared of jumping to people to heal. I recommend you get used to it early because it is a very useful way to play. That being said, Dream Simulacrum's additional healing in AoE is really strong, and remember that extra heal over time effect is stronger because of reverberations. Also note that because it's stronger on you too, if you have like an echo on you and then you temporal anomaly a bunch of other targets and then say, is that gonna hit? God, that move is huge. Then if I want a big heal over time, I'll actually hit myself, as that's going to provide the strongest version of this Verdant Embrace heal over time I can possibly get. That being said, just having a stronger heal over time and a stronger heal because of Dream Simulacrum is worth it. Okay, let's move to our Apex Talents. Note that our Apex Talent is called Marithra's Blessing, which is also the name of the spell that it gives us, and it has 3 ranks for a total of 4 talent points. The second rank requires 2 talent points to get its full effectiveness. And I just want to get this out of the way. You don't need it. If you want to run something experimental that doesn't take Marithra's Blessing, you can get rid of these points. Now, it is a useful talent, and the beginner's build's taking it because I think it's quite useful. However, rank 1 might be enough for some builds. Rank 2 1 point or rank 2 2 points and no rank 3 might be enough for some builds. Right now, Marithra's Blessing's on the slightly weaker side in dungeons, but it's still very useful, and all of the benefits you get from this are good. But if you're feeling crazy and you want to get rid of these and do something else insane with it, right? Be my guest. By all means, get creative. However, I think for a new player, it's worth learning how to use them and then figuring out how much of it you want to get rid of if you have something more potent in mind. Although I do think Raiders, you're probably running Marithra's Blessing at least through rank 2, if not also running rank 3. Flameshaper players, you're probably always running Marithra's Blessing because Dream Breath's instant healing being increased is really strong, but let's go through them all. Essence abilities have a chance to grant you your Marithra's Blessing, and I already demonstrated this spell in the beginner section. The rank 2 specifies that reversion protects allies, reversing 1% then 2% for both points of all damage taken and healing them instead. This is a really big deal, as if there's a major damage event going off and you have a bazillion reversions out, yeah, you're going to be able to get a ton of healing done on all those targets passively. So this is a pretty powerful one. It's also useful in dungeons, but again, a little less useful in dungeons, better in the raid environment. Rank 3 says that Dream Breath's instant healing is increased by 125%, and Dream Breath has a 100% chance to grant a Marithra's Blessing, meaning you can plan to use your Marithra's Blessing. And remember that that buff lasts for an entire 60 seconds. I also wanted to note, I gave 2 reversions to this target. Note that it is healing 2% of damage it's taking all the time, twice. So that means that if you have the rank 2 here fully maxed out, if you have double reversions on targets, they'll be reversing 2% and 2% of all damage taken, which is really, really, really strong. So just wanted to get that out there. Now let's go move on to Chrono Warden and Flameshaper. Chrono Warden and Flameshaper are hero talents. I'm very, very happy to report both of these are viable. They're probably both going to be viable in raid, even at a high level. Furthermore, in dungeons, this is just going to change the way you play. It's same with raid, but that's the most fun part about these talents, is that this mostly is going to affect the style in which you play rather than forcing you into one meta build. And I'm really happy with the balance. There might be a point in time where one is significantly stronger than the other, but as of recording this video and doing all the testing on pre-patch and in the midnight beta, I'm happy to report that both of these feel very strong, and for most keystone levels, you're going to be able to get away with both. And I think they provide something special for those looking for it. Chrono Warden, as an overview, is a little more focused on cooldown reduction and the spells you already have, making your original kit stronger. You play into the core of that Dragonflight style healing, and it works incredibly well in your favor. It gives you a lot of tools to make use of the things you're already good at using. Flameshaper adds to what you can do. It gives you more possibilities with 2 charges of your breath spells and having more healing over time and being able to consume flame. There are a lot of very cool, very viable options, but it does expand all of the things that you can do, making it not only a little more complicated, adding a little bit more flavor for some players, but also it has the ability to shoot itself in the foot. 2 charges of a spell doesn't mean more healing. So Chrono Warden has cooldown reduction on its empowered spells. Flameshaper gets it on Fire Breath, and yeah, your Dream Breath's on a 20-second cooldown naturally with the way we talent, so yeah, you get some cooldown reduction, but 2 charges is just 2 charges. It's not cooling them down any faster, and thus if you use them back to back, you're still kind of out of resources for a while. However, because you stockpile them when there's no healing, there is arguments where Flameshaper can do a large amount of burst healing, a little bit better than Chrono Warden, but over a long period of time, the Chrono Warden player will likely get more spell casts out over the course of a fight or the course of a dungeon. So if you're trying to get into the weeds, that's the thing to think about. But let's dive into these hero talents to figure out what you want to play. I have Chrono Warden for the beginner build because it's super easy to use, it's very snappy, it's very fun, and ultimately a lot of these things are passive, so while you're learning, it's not overly complicated. Starting with Chrono Flame, your Living Flame is enhanced, repeating 15% of the damage or healing you dealt to the target in the last 5 seconds is arcane, up to an amount. That amount is increased by another talent of ours, Overclock. So this is doing a lot of extra work for you by just existing. So if you're pelting someone with living flames back to back to back, you'll do more damage and you'll do more healing. What's not to love? Also, it works on previous effects as well. If you just fire breath the target, you've done damage to it. Therefore, you're going to get the Chrono Flame effect on that target at probably maximum potency because you've already dealt the damage or you've already dealt the healing. Over here we have Warp. This is why your hover has turned into a blink. Note that if you use it mid-air, it gets a cool blink effect, but it is actually still a dash, I believe, mid-air. So if you are mid-air and you use it and you go forward and you're like, oh, I thought I pressed nothing. Why did I go forward? You were mid-air. The game thought you were mid-air. Otherwise, it continues doing everything that hover did, so you can cast while this blink effect is going off, etc. Down here, motes of acceleration is why a bunch of motes come out of you that make your allies faster, significantly faster for 30 seconds. And if you need another defensive, ta-da, temporality. Warp reduces damage taken by 20%, starting high and reducing over 3 seconds. So you can use temporality to kind of pseudo parry something if you need more defense. Mostly a world record pushing angle, however, it's good to know you have it. Double time. When Dream Breath or Fire Breath critically strike, their duration is extended by 2 seconds up to a maximum of 12. This is godlike. It's very nice. It does a lot of work for you. Over here, if you don't have a lot of crit non-defensive abilities with a 45-second or longer cooldown, grant 5% intellect for 15 seconds. In essence, spells increase its duration. Time convergence is strong. I tend to get more use out of double time. Is personal preference. If you have a lot of crit, I think double time is always better, but it's not like time convergence is ever bad, so I'll leave that up to you which one you want to use. Here's where Temporal Burst is. We already talked about this. It's what makes your Tip the Scales a major cooldown while you're in Chrono Warden. And yeah, 30% haste movement speed and cooldown recovery rate decaying over 30 seconds is very strong. Temporal Anomaly mana cost is reduced by 15% and the cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds, which is why Temporal Anomaly is so damn potent when you're playing Chrono Warden. Instability Matrix is why your empowered spells will reduce up to 6 seconds of cooldown. And by the way, I don't know if this is officially documented anywhere, and I might be wrong. I never see Instability Matrix lowball me. I almost always get a couple of seconds out of this, and I oftentimes see that it rolls rather high. I don't know if there's just an insane amount of luck on my side or if it's coded a certain way, but yeah, this is very often giving you a large amount of cooldown reduction on your empowered spells. Tip the Scales is now a 1 minute 30 second cooldown. Temporal Burst is gives you Essence Burst every 6 seconds, again adding to why Temporal Anomaly. Tip the Scales is such an important cooldown. Chrono Flames getting increased in their usefulness. And then over here, Reverberations is why your Verdant Embrace heals as a heal over time, and 60% of what it heals is very powerful, and if it crits, it's absurdly powerful. So Reverberations is one of my go-to heals, right? Verdant Embrace your whole party, they get a big heal over time on them. And remember, if they had a reversion on them, right, 10% or 20% increased healing, you can see where I'm going. Also, for each of these effects out, you'll gain 3% flat haste up to 9%. And remember, that's flat haste, not scaling haste. So that just goes right into your stat line, which feels really good and doesn't require you really moving into the haste stat very much. Echo's 10% more effective, wahoo. After Image is that your empowered spells send up to 3 Chrono Flames to your targets. Like I said, this is supposed to smart heal. I think it's smart heals. It hasn't smart healed for me recently, so it may or may not be bugged as of recording this video. But yeah, hit a bunch of enemies with Fire Breath, get some Chrono Flames. Those can trigger Essence Burst. They also don't count as a direct heal. So if you say hit a Dream Breath on your team and then the Chrono Flames go out, they won't use up any echoes, although you probably just used up your echoes with Dream Breath. After Image is quite nice. It's why even just tap firing a Dream Breath for a heal over time will still do a chunk of healing, because you got these Chrono Flames just flying around helping out your teammates. Chrono Warden's my favorite way to play because it's fast and it rewards quick thinking. I love Chrono Warden, and I suggest everyone run it, at least to get used to Preservation Evoker. But Flame Shaper, now that they've removed the clunk, is awesome, and you're going to see me playing it a lot more in this expansion. And I think it really does allow for quite a lot of creativity. Let's dive into it. Dream Breath and Fire Breath gain an additional charge, which on its own is pretty powerful. Hover, Deep Breath, and Dream Flight travel 40% faster, and Hover travels 40% further, which is insane. Shape of Flame says that Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet scorch enemies and blind them with ash, causing their next attack within 4 seconds to miss, which is neat, but I'm almost always taking Trailblazer. Conduit of Flame, critical strike chance against targets above 50% health is increased by 15%. granting you even more critical strike chance. Titanic Precision Living Flame has one extra chance to trigger Essence Burst when it critically strikes. So if your Living Flame crits, it will roll the dice one more time for an Essence Burst. I've never gotten it to give me 2 Essence Burst on one Living Flame. That might be possible. It is possible with an Echo. I'm just not sure if it's possible with Titanic Precision. Something for someone to test. Fire Breath's cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds. Lovely. Fire Breath and Dream Breath reach their maximum empowered level 20% faster. Fire Breath's damage over time is 4 seconds longer. Dream Breath's heal over time is 6 seconds longer, meaning even if you fully charge it up, you're still going to have something to play with for Consume Flame on Dream Breath. And the Fire Breath extra damage is just some extra damage. Over here you have a choice node. You're usually taking Expanded Lungs. Fire Breath's damage over time is increased by 30%, and Dream Breath's heal over time is increased by 30%, meaning that a level 1 Fire Breath is technically more damage, and a level 1 Dream Breath is technically more healing. However, sometimes you need a burst heal. Sometimes you want more leaping flames, right? Fully charging is still good with Expanded Lungs. But do note that if the target doesn't live long enough on the Fire Breath, you're not actually getting more damage, right? You know what I mean? Like, if the target doesn't live, you lose the extra damage. So if it's the end of a pull and you want to do some damage, make sure to still fully charge up your Fire Breath. On the other side, in Kindle, Essence abilities are enhanced with Flame, dealing 20% of the healing or damage done as fire over 8 seconds. This is cool for some Blossom experimental builds if you want to have some fun. It does increase your single target damage quite a bit on Disintegrate, especially if it's Titan's gifted. But I gotta be real, it never feels better than Expanded Lungs. So like, fun experimental node, very safe and reliable node. Fulminous Roar, Fire Breath, and Dream Breath deal their damage and healing 20% more often, which is great, just more healing. Obsidian Scales also applies to your target or one nearby injured ally at 50% value. This does apply the world's tiniest little renewing blaze to the target as well if you have that talented, but yeah, giving away a defensive is quite nice. This used to be technically a little more powerful with the old renewing blaze, but giving out a defensive is nothing to scoff at. That is a really powerful ability so long as you can afford to get rid of a defensive. The other one is a little more passive. Your wounds have a small chance to cauterize, healing you for 30% of the damage taken. This is nice if you want to just forget about your problems. Also, this can be technically kind of nice for helping maintain your mastery. Life Cinders feels like it's better on paper, but there's a world where Draconic Instincts gives you a consistency to your mastery. I'm going to leave this entirely up to you. Over here, Essence Well, Dream Breath, and Fire Breath have a 50% chance to grant an Essence Burst. And then your Twin Flame says that you're consuming an Essence Burst fires a Twin Flame, healing your target for an amount. Now, it also will bounce an additional 2 times with Fire Torrent below it. I need to show this one off as, hold on, let me not. I want to show what this looks like because it is a little weird the first time you see it, but let's try to get an Essence Burst. Let's hope we get one. Sweet. When you Essence Burst, you'll see it bounce around. It kind of goes boing, 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 boing. This just makes your ramping process do a little more healing, but it's actually like a pretty nice amount of healing. And because in Raid, you end up spending a lot of time getting Essence Bursts and trying to give them out as many times as possible, this talent actually does quite a bit of extra healing for you. So whenever you need to apply echoes to people, if it's an Essence Bursted one, you'll get the normal healing of your echo and then the Twin Flame healing on top of it before you even pop the echo. So it's a really, really nice talent. I can't stress, like, it does more than you think it does, and it's very nice to have. But finally, let's get to the big one, Consume Flame. This no longer works the way it used to, and thank God they got rid of Engulf. That button was so clunky. Verdant Embrace healing consumes 4 seconds of Dream Breath from allies it heals, detonating it and healing that target for 200% of the amount consumed. I wanted to reword that because it only heals the target that it's applied to. It does not explode and heal everyone around them. The Emerald Blossom version is technically AoE. It consumes less time from the Dream Breath, but because Emerald Blossom can hit 3 or up to 5 targets, you can use that in Blossom builds to do some healing in AoE and consume a lot of Dream Breath. But again, it's only working on the targets with Dream Breath, healing them individually. So it is weaker than the effect before. But what this does mean is that you can do things like everyone's got a Dream Breath, you Temporal Anomaly to give everyone an Echo, then you hit Verdant Embrace to consume Flame off of everyone who received it. This is pretty powerful. It's a really nice way to add to your single target healing to top people off, especially even without an echo sometimes. It's great. Consume Flame will be the crux of some of your raiding builds as well, but you really don't need to lean into the Blossom side of this unless you're running a Blossom build. Consuming 2 seconds off Dream Breath might be useful in a pinch if Verdant Embrace is off cooldown, but realistically, this is why a lot of the times I run the 2 charges of Verdant Embrace on Flame Shaper, because whether you're doing it through echoes or you're doing it in single target, Consume Flame is a powerful effect to get more uses out of. Now, that's it for the talents. This section takes forever, and there's a lot of creativity and preservation. But I wanted to note this little point on how to learn when you're learning a new spec. And I said this in my Brewmaster guide recently, but once you're done playing around, take a read through the talents, especially if you're new or returning. Just reading through the talents after learning how to play gives you an appreciation for what's interacting with what. It can make you rethink certain interactions. I find it to be the most helpful thing whenever I'm learning a spec. Like, I'll pick up a DPS, I'll grab a talent build, I'll follow a guide, I'll press some buttons, and then after I've done a dungeon or two, I kind of look back and go, oh, you know what, I didn't know that, or oh, I forgot that's why that was happening. And it makes all the difference in the world. So make sure you do that. Okay, now it's time to move on to our next section, and I actually have to scroll through my notes here because I don't remember what was after doing our talents. Let's talk about stats and gear. Just note that if you're coming from season 1 of Midnight, I'm going to talk about the tier set in just a second. If you're coming from a different season, note that the tier sets don't really apply to you here, but this rule does apply to you. Tier sets are the most important pieces of gear you're going to wear. I always recommend, especially if you're new, to just wear your 4-piece of tier set and only upgrade tier set pieces with higher tier set pieces. Try not to upgrade your, say, tier set gloves to mythic non-tier set gloves unless you've replaced it with another tier piece on a different part of your body. Just keep that in mind. Tier sets are usually the most important. Outside of tier sets, I'm going to be statting for intellect, going for gear score and more intellect whenever I can. Your jewelry and your trinkets are exempt from this, and that they're usually the oddballs that either don't provide main stat or don't provide secondary stat or provide an effect that is more important than the main stat it offers. However, when it comes to every other non-tier piece of gear, I tend to go for item level. Now, our tier set really quick. Verdant Embrace healing is increased by 20% and the cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds. Verdant Embrace grows an Emerald Blossom at your target for 100% effectiveness. This is less useful on Chrono Warden as it just kind of lets you use Twin Flame or Twin Echoes or whatever it's called in the talent tree. But this is very nice for Flame Shaper, and of course that Verdant Embrace healing increase will be very useful on Chrono Warden. So, let's talk about these stats. So of course we want main stat. Main stat's always the thing I'm trying to upgrade the most of. Let's go through these secondary stats. Mastery is the bang for the buck, most amount of healing you will receive. In PvP, this is your most important non-versatility stat, and in Raid, this is what you're going to be statting around for more healing. Just remember, if you don't get Mastery on a target, they receive 0 of the benefit, which is why I don't tend to oversend my Mastery, even in Raid. That might just be a personal preference for me. If you're looking for raw throughput, it's going to be Mastery, and that's going to be great. But in dungeons, I actually find it to not be the best stat for Preservation Evoker. So Mastery is never going to harm you. It's always going to increase your healing output, but it comes at a risk that you might not have Mastery when you go to heal a target. And so you always have to be calculating around using your Mastery. That being said, critical strike chance is always good. This is good every day of the week, right? It doubles your spell's healing and damage. What's not to love? We work with really big numbers that get doubled are even bigger numbers. Numbers, woohoo, right? Critical strike is good. If you want a stat for a high critical strike chance no matter what you're doing, it's not a bad idea. And it lets you play around things like Exhilarating Burst, and what was that talent called? I want to say it's called Double Time. Yeah, it also lets you play around things like Double Time, and with things like Conduit of Flame, critical strike chance against targets of a 50% and health is increased by 15%. You can get a lot of crit chance very easily out of Evoker. So crit strike is very good. It's not usually my highest stat, but if you're coming from like Devastation or Augmentation, it might be your highest stat. And so it's not a bad place to start working. Versatility is actually my favorite stat on Preservation that's not crit. Mastery is good, and I always try to smatter some Mastery in there, but Versatility is very much a double dip kind of situation for Preservation Evoker. It increases damage and healing done by Versatility percentage, it decreases damage taken by half of that percent. So I'm doing 10% more damage and healing right now, and I am receiving 5% less damage. This helps with maintaining mastery, which is why I like it. And of course, damage and healing going up is always nice when you do a lot of damage and you do a lot of healing. But when you don't have mastery, your versatility and critical strike chance are pulling the rest of your healing. And thus, I actually like having a large amount of versatility and critical strike chance because it tends to math out with your lower amounts of mastery to the same amount of healing in many situations. More mastery will eventually mean more healing, but because you have to have mastery, this can have a risk to it. So in dungeons, feel free to mix and match critical strike, versatility, and mastery to your heart's content, picking whichever one you want to keep higher. Maybe you're a raider, so you naturally have some more mastery gear and less to swap around for crit and versatility. That's totally fine. If you're coming from Aug and Dev and you have a bazillion haste still, and you have critical strike chance, don't worry. It's not going to mean you can't heal. High haste actually does provide some benefit like essence regeneration and slightly faster cast times to the Preservation Evoker. It's just not better than other stats in most scenarios. There is a world where you run high mastery, high crit with a chunk of haste just to get more essence regeneration for raid, but this is something that you'll see in later seasons. You likely don't have the stat allocation to get a whole lot of that in the first season, but it is what it is. We'll see what those stats look like, what those rings and trinkets look like that help us out here. And I don't know if I mentioned, when it comes to trinket slots, I don't do a lot of research before the expansion starts because honestly, they tend to change a whole lot and change the balance of these things. So try not to get overly excited about trinkets and just use whatever I find and check out what people are using that's super effective. If there's a really good healing trinket or really good damage trinket, might go out of my way to go grab it if I have the opportunity. Now, I always get this question, so I want to answer it here. You might be going, Bowser, really? You don't want a lot of haste? Yeah, we only have so many moves that are hasted. If you see the green text in the move, that means that it's a hasted cooldown and that it is affected by your haste. And preservation just doesn't get a lot. And it will affect your cast time, like this 1.8 second cast time can go as low as 1.5 or 1.6, but 0.2 seconds off of a heal isn't usually more healing than hitting that heal for 5 to 10% harder. It's going to depend on the scenario. It's not like haste is a bad thing, but preservation has something on its side that lets you move away from haste. And that's the whole idea of echoes. You're both part reaction healer, part setup healer, and I guess every healer is to an extent. But because it's about setting up echoes, you don't need haste to snap your fingers and save the day. Once you're set up, all you have to do is wait for the moment to strike and pop your button, charge up that dream breath or whatever you're doing, and let the heals rip. And having a low haste value doesn't really interrupt that playstyle. It might make your GCD a little bit longer, but your global cooldown being a little longer isn't likely going to be why people died. It's going to be because you didn't set them up beforehand. And while more haste can make clutching and saving people's lives a little bit easier, so does just playing your resources better, and you will get better at preservation as you play it. So you really don't need a whole lot of haste. Again, not the end of the world if you do. It truly isn't a problem. If you just watch my Brewmaster guide, you know that haste is like the worst stat in the world on Brewmaster. That's not the case here. But play around with your stats and have fun. People have come to me with some wild high crit builds with like a large amount of versatility and just threw mastery in the dumpster and got away with murder. So there's a lot of viability here. Have fun with your stats. This is the advanced section of the guide. It's more like a tips and tricks section with some positioning requirements and some other things you need to hear, but I wanted to go over the major way in which you play Raid, as Raid has one very important thing that you can do to increase your healing, and most Raid strategies do revolve around this in one way, shape, or form. I'm not really going to cover Raid very much because I don't really enjoy raiding all that much, so I do it and it's fun, but it's not something I ever really want to make a big guide on. But if you are a raider, let's talk about something you can do. First of all, Temporal Anomaly gets out at 5 echoes, right? And it'll shield everyone it passes through, even though that amount does dip a lot. But because these last longer than your echo cooldown, it's possible for you to echo targets that don't have echoes on them, and then throw another Temporal Anomaly right before mechanic hits. Then pop a major heal to heal everyone that got an echo. This double Temporal Anomaly setup can be set with a timer. So let's say you know an attack is coming out in 26 seconds. You can, for instance, get ready, get some Essence Burst. Then when you know there's about 15 seconds before the mechanic, throw the temporal anomaly, get some echoes out. Then keep doing damage in an attempt to get some more essence burst. Then use those echoes to get even more healing done, throw a temporal anomaly right before the damage hits, and then as that damage strikes, you press the healing button, and ta-da, you've done an astronomical amount of healing. This is easier said than done. You're gonna have to figure out the mechanics and time it. And furthermore, it's okay to do half of this setup, heal the damage event, throw another temporal anomaly, and heal the rest of the damage event. As especially in heroic difficulty and easier, you're not going to be like instantly wiping to a lot of mechanics because you did it wrong. But as you learn the fight and you do pull after pull, you're going to find, oh hey, I can do a double temporal anomaly setup here. There's also my favorite thing to do if you have enough time to set it up mid-fight, but it's best at the start of a pull. Hit stasis and press temporal anomaly. Do not heal. You may not directly heal anybody. Don't break your stasis. This does take a little bit of time to set up. Raids will get a little annoyed if you have to do this every single pull, but it's really good, and it's the strongest amount of healing at the start of a dungeon or a pull ever. Throw another temporal anomaly. You are now ready to go. When the first major damage mechanic comes in, you can throw a temporal anomaly once it's off cooldown. Then you can unleash your stasis, and you can even turn while firing these balls to fire them in different directions and give out a bazillion echoes. Then hit it. Whatever big chungus heal you want to slam. And you're going to do so much healing. This is the highest amount of healing any healer can do at any given time. But given that it's got a hefty 30-something second startup in order to be effective in the middle of a raid fight, it's almost always best reserved for the start of a fight. But even if the first major heal check is 45 seconds in, you can have your other healers cover you, and then you use this massive setup at that 45-second mark to try to help cover the mechanic. It's really fun, but it's even really practical, but it does require a lot of setup. So you have to know where it goes, but don't forget about it. But the double temporal anomaly setup is a large amount of raid healing. So try to practice playing around with that while you're looking at timers and you're learning mechanics and where your healing goes. If you can get that double temporal anomaly to go off while the damage is happening, snap your fingers and do a massive amount, you're going to see yourself climb up that HPS bar. But remember, HPS is not the most important metric in a fight. I made an entire video about that if you need some more raid assistance. That being said, let's move on to the rest of the advanced section. Let's go over positioning a little bit, as this is a pretty important part of preservation, and I made an entire video dedicated to this and combos. Just note, if you go and watch that video, it's outdated. It's from the War Within Season 1, so you're going to hear spell names and interactions that no longer work. However, when it comes to positioning, a lot of it holds up. First things first, your Dream Breath is your guide. Use your Dream Breath to figure out where you should be standing. It goes 40 yards, and it lets you know kind of who you can hit with one of your biggest spells. So try to find a way that you can hit all of your teammates with a Dream Breath. If you can only hit all but one in a dungeon scenario, that's okay, especially if it's the tank is the one you're missing. And don't ever feel bad. Let's pretend all these players are, let's pretend this player right here is out of range, right? And I can only hit these two. Well, that's okay. Throw the temporal anomaly, which might still hit this target. Oh my God. And then feel free to echo the one that's out of range, because realistically, that's going to be good enough. Making sure you have an echo on them is how you heal a lot of the times. I actually have some footage here from a Halls of Atonement I did on my last day of the War Within dungeons, and I want you to see that there's this warlock behind me. I can't even see them, but I know that my position right here is good. It allows me to react to mechanics, and I'm not going to overlap too many crazy circles after the Halkia Shard does its thrash. So I just constantly keep hitting the echo behind me. This is a really useful strategy. You can easily, in most healing scenarios, deal with one person out of range. And if you have two people out of range, as long as the healing checks aren't hard, that will work too. When the healing checks are more severe though, having more than one person out of range can become insurmountably difficult. And so sometimes you need people to move in. Another technique, and I don't have a training dummy anymore, I was going to pull out the turnip punching bag, but I used it earlier, is let's pretend that right where I am is where the tank is, right? Tank and melee are standing on top of me right now. We can, we'll just pretend it's these training dummies. So tank and melee are standing on top of me. Okay, great. Throw your temporal anomaly to the back line, right? Let's pretend those are where my casters are. look, your Dream Breath hits them, you can do everything. Sometimes standing in the melee stack and turning around is the way to go. And then to really add to your tricks up your sleeve, your Dream Breath also has a hitbox on your butt. So if I stand here and I hit a Dream Breath level 1, note that I hit the target behind me with a full Dream Breath and the target to the side of me, even though that cone wasn't really aiming at them. That's because this little circle around you is an effective hitbox. So if you have a stubborn mage that keeps liking to walk behind you, don't worry, you're going to be able to hit them. I don't know what it is about people always trying to back behind me when I'm playing Preservation Evoker. Like, I'm literally trying to hit them with a cone and they keep running behind me, and whatever. This does get the job done. Now, here's some harsh lessons. Before we go talking about how to deal with people who aren't positioning very well, let's talk about you a little bit. A lot of the times when I review preservation footage, there was a way that the preservation player could have positioned better. And I hate saying this, but a lot of the times, the pres player is the one who needs to improve. Some people go, I just can't deal with the range problems, except I deal with the range problems all the time with players who are significantly worse at positioning than you would ever expect. I pug a lot, I see a lot of players. A lot of the times it's up to us to figure that out. And truly, you will find some positions where you're like, oh, hey, you know what? With a hover or with a quick double jump, I can get between these two targets. Perfect. Remember, you can activate an echo well outside of a 30-yard range. So as long as you got an echo on them, you can be somewhere else and heal other people and still get some healing down on that target. Always try to review in your head, where could I have been standing? Where could I be next time? Was I positioning somewhere bad there, or could I have done that better? And don't ever be scared of the melee stack. You're quite good at playing in melee. However, sometimes we have a problematic teammate. Let's get the easy one out of the way. Rescue. Use rescue. Use rescue to move teammates. It's no longer a defensive. You're no longer holding it for defensive purposes. You might hold it to remove crowd control effects at some point, but realistically, I use that move to move people around, and I recommend that you do too. Pick them up and move them. If they keep running back into range, they'll either eventually figure it out, or they'll fall into the final category we'll talk about. Next thing is, feel free to ping them. Hit them with a warning ping. Remember, you can target player frames with your ping key and use the smart pings. You can also target yourself and put a nice little arrow over your head to let them know you want them to come in. That can be extremely useful. Also, please move in or move in for heals is a great quick way that you can type something, or maybe even macro that sentence into party chat so that you can easily tell people to move in, but then they're still not moving in. There's one final tip: move in or die. For whatever reason, even when there's some language barriers in the way, move in or die has done the most amount of work for me. This has worked when I was playing in EU and I had people that clearly weren't speaking English. This has worked in North America when I'm playing with Spanish speaking players. This has been a godsend for me because move in or die seems to be known by a lot of people. Maybe it's just enough basic English and gaming terminology. I should not say gamer words, gaming terminology, that people know it, but it's done wonders for me. But let's get to the ultimate point. Sometimes they're bad. I hate telling you this because it sounds a little toxic, but no, seriously, some players are bad. And if you're playing in higher level content, right? If you're playing with new players, be gentle, be kind with them. I'm always a big stickler for being kind to the new players. But seriously, you're in a plus 17 and they don't know how to position. If you're in a plus 12 in Midnight in the new season and they still don't know how to position, that's a skill issue. And I'm not kidding, and I don't mean that as a meme. No, let them die. That is on them at this point. Every healer benefits from having their teammates close by. Every single healer has a mechanic that either, it jumps from target to target and it jumps better if the targets are close, or it has less travel time like a Prayer of Mending. Every single healer has a benefit for players being closer to them. And so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when people are running away from their healers. Preservation has a more severe problem with that issue, but I didn't have an issue with this when Mistweaver used to have a 20-yard range on Ancient Teachings. By the way, that's cursed if you know Mistweaver. Shoutouts to Shadowlands, my beloved. So, let people to know move in, tell them, try to be kind, move in or die does wonders, rescue them, but when all else fails, it's not your fault. And I'm here to take the blame. If you think that that's toxic or rude, I give you permission to every once in a while review in your head. Could you have done better? Where could you have positioned? Okay, you ran through it, but that mage stood at Turbo Narnia spacing and never wanted to move in and even talked crap in chat. Let him die, man. It's fine. You're okay. I'll still love you. That player was bad. They're gonna learn one day, or they're never gonna learn. But you're probably never gonna see him again, and that's fine. But I figure that needs to go somewhere in this video. And for my final tip, and realistically for the outro of this video, preservation has a lot of solutions to problems, and there isn't ever usually one correct solution. Don't let anyone tell you that preservation can't do something. There's been a lot of chatter online of, oh, preservation's low tier, or, oh, preservation's bad in this content or bad in that, and they've never been right. I've never, ever had someone tell me preservation can't do something or is bad at something, and I didn't either prove them wrong or find someone else that proved them wrong. Especially with the raiders. The raiders find crazy solutions to their problems, and I've seen that happen time and time again, even within my own guild of Power Word Furry, watching my guildmaster absolutely blast on preservation and find solutions to problems that they were running into. So give it your all, have fun with preservation, and always try to think outside of the box. As a final piece of advice, this World of Warcraft game is not solved. Listen, I'm a Super Smash Bros. Melee player. We've been playing that game for 20-something years, and it's having a renaissance right now, and it's straight up still not solved. And we know so much about that game. World of Warcraft changes almost every week. Every single month, there are balance patches and changes to this game. If you think this game is solved, you simply haven't played enough other video games. And preservation has so many fun solutions to its problems. So experiment and have fun. But that's going to do it for this one. Please hit subscribe if you want more content like this. This is my full-time job. And hey, if you have any other questions, let me know down below in the comment section or stop by stream. Take care, friends. I'll see you all soon.